across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company and indeed your loyalty, because we've got such incredible viewing and listening figures this week. I'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the show, but thank you so much for watching and listening. I really appreciate it. Really big scandal continues. Mandelson and Keir Starmer. Also David Lammy, now saying Deputy Prime Minister and Celebrity Mastermind contestant, saying that he warned Keir Starmer. Well, why was it that he said Mandelson was the right man for the job then? Why go out in public and say, oh, Mandelson's absolutely wonderful, he'd be a great US ambassador? We'll examine that. We'll also examine what Pat McFadden has been saying. He is the Welfare Secretary, and he has been saying Mandelson needs to pay back the £55,000 that he, up to £55,000 that he was given as a payoff when he was sacked as ambassador to America. Really, usually when people screw up, they don't get rewarded for it, but Peter Mandelson seems to have happened time and time and time again. Lots to discuss in all of that. We'll also talk about someone who was been giving lots of warnings about Islamism, saying that anti-Muslim incidents in the UK are very high. He says he was silenced by the government, by the Home Office. We'll talk to him a little bit later on. We'll talk as well about why the Labour Party lose the pub. Can Nigel Farage save the great British pub? One of the most articulate landlords, Rory, will be on with us a little bit later on. Lots to talk about this morning. I want your views, and who is to blame for the Mandelson scandal as well. Who should carry the can? Morgan McSweeney, of course, the Chief of Staff in Downing Street, still in power, still in place. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please. We'll play out as many of those as we can. Tech Update goes through every one of them. 0344 499 1000. Same number for phone calls and for WhatsApp text messages. So much to discuss between now and 1 o'clock, so stay with me here on Talk. Well, on the front, I think it's the Sunday Telegraph today, actually. I don't have it in front of me, but David Lammy saying that he wants, that he was warning about Peter Mandelson. He hasn't said this publicly, but friends of David Lammy, his allies, have said that he warned Keir Starmer. He said that Peter Mandelson was the wrong appointment to be the ambassador to the United States. Well, let's just remind ourselves a few months ago what David Lammy told Sky News when Peter Mandelson was appointed.
Peter Mandelson is a man of considerable expertise. He's the right man for this moment to be our ambassador. He's been a business secretary, a Northern Ireland secretary. Of course, he's worked in the European Commission, and he brings all of that to bear working as our ambassador in the United States. And of course, he's looking forward to presenting his credentials to Donald Trump.
Well, bit of a change of tune there. If you were warning against someone, why go out on the media and say how wonderful that person is? Pat McFadden has been talking to the media this morning on Sky News. The compensation for Peter Mandelson is the next row, and the Sunday Times reporting this morning that Lord Mandelson received a taxpayer-funded payoff, that's you and me, that's our money, worth tens of thousands of pounds, despite being sacked as US ambassador over his links to the paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. Mandelson secured an exit payment equivalent to 3 months' salary from the Foreign Office after he was forced out in September, just 7 months into the role. He was earning between £155,000 and £220,000 a year, so his exit payment would have been something between £38,000 and £55,000. That's what he got for being friends with a paedophile and for being dismissed from his role. This is where we are in Britain in 2026. Let's see what Pat McFadden has been saying about that in Sky News this morning.
That would be negotiated between him and his employers, who were the Foreign Office. So I don't know what was settled or agreed on that, but it would be a matter between them.
Morally, do you think he should pay this money back or give it to charity? In the circumstances?
I think he probably should, yes. Either of those. Either give it back or give it to a charity, perhaps one involving violence against women and girls. I think taking a payoff in these circumstances, I don't think the public will think much of that.
Peter Mandelson, as we know, is a multimillionaire. So if he wants to give £55,000 to charity, I couldn't do it. I expect most of our viewers and listeners couldn't do it. But he can, because he has lots and lots and lots of money. It would be a very simple thing for him to do. A matter of principle. Remember those? Pat McFadden was also talking about the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's responsibility. Here's what he said about Keir Starmer.
In the end, it's a prime ministerial, well, signed off by the King, but it's a prime ministerial appointment, and prime ministers have to take responsibility for the decisions that they make. I don't know the advice that was given, but in the end, it's a prime ministerial appointment, and I think the stuff about Morgan McSweeney is sort of beside the point. I believe that when the Prime Minister took the decision to make this appointment, he had no sense of Peter Mandelson's relationship with this man, as has been exposed in the last couple of weeks.
And the Welfare Secretary, Pat McFadden, also saying that he believes the Prime Minister should stay in his role. This is what he said.
I believe he should stay. I think he's got a 5-year mandate, which was just voted for 18 months or so ago. I also think it is not good for the country to change its Prime Minister every 18 months or 2 years. It's leading to chaos and uncertainty economically, politically and reputationally around the world. I think we should stick with the Prime Minister, support him. He admits he's made a bad mistake here. He has apologised for it. And I'm sure he will learn from that going forward.
I'm sorry, am I in a fever dream here? Am I just not attached to the Matrix this morning? He says that changing Keir Starmer as Prime Minister would bring chaos and uncertainty. Because at the moment, everything's going really, really well, isn't it? Honestly, the question we're asking this morning, who is to blame for the Mandelson scandal? Do you think it's Starmer? Do you think it's Mandelson himself? Epstein? Morgan McSweeney? What's your view on that? 0344 499 1000. Let's go straight to the debate desk. And Maxwell Marlowe is with me. He's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
And Luke Gittos, the lawyer and writer. Great to see you back in the debate desk, both of you. Chaos and uncertainty will be avoided if we keep Keir Starmer. Maxwell.
I thought we had strong and stable government under Theresa.
In the national interest.
On the national interest.
In the national interest.
Wrong Prime Minister, I do apologise. No, it's silly, right? I do think, though, that getting rid of him would be bad for the country because it could usher in someone like, well, I think David Lammy seems to be throwing his hat in the ring. That's why he's come out and
I love David. Sorry,
know.
we just have to play this again. I'm terribly sorry. Luke, I'll come to you in a second. But this is David Lammy. He's on the front of the Sunday Telegraph newspaper this morning. David Lammy last night turned on the Prime Minister as allies revealed he had warned against appointing Lord Mandelson as US Ambassador. And in blue to Sir Keir Starmer, the Sunday Telegraph reports, the Deputy Prime Minister let it be known that he had not been in favour of bringing the Prince of Darkness back into government over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Well, this is really helpful, isn't it? David Lammy, what a principled, great guy. Maybe he'd be an excellent Prime Minister. Hold on a second. What did he say at the time? Let's just check the receipts on this. This is what he said at the time.
Peter Mandelson is a man of considerable expertise. He's the right man for this moment to be our ambassador. He's been a business secretary, a Northern Ireland secretary. Of course, he's worked in the European Commission, and he brings all of that to bear working as our ambassador in the United States. And of course, he's looking forward to presenting his credentials to Donald Trump.
Luke, are we living in a parallel universe here? I mean, what's going on?
Well, you talked about who to blame. And I thought Keir Starmer's response this week was particularly tin-eared, but very Starmerite, because he's essentially a lawyer, and he blamed the process. And he said that the vetting process failed. And you can sort of imagine Keir Starmer limping on for a good few months on the basis that he's going to reform the vetting processes, that he's going to introduce new anti-lobbying legislation, perhaps. These are the suggestion from Gordon Brown this week. You can sort of imagine that happening because Keir Starmer is someone who sort of trades on a bureaucratic authority like no other leader, really. So you can sort of see that happening. But I do think that it's worth remembering how this crisis is going to strike him personally, I think, because I remember him as a director of public prosecutions, and at that time he made his cause célèbre violence against women and girls. So he was reforming evidence laws. He was famous for reforming the laws around violence against women and girls, made it a big part of his role as DPP. And now every day we're waking up with a new story where his name is associated with one of the worst scandals regarding violence against women and girls in recent history. So I just think personally he's going to actually really struggle to maintain his, this kind of bureaucratic line. Because I think it strikes him personally.
I think that's a very good point. And he's just not a politician either. The Prime Minister is just, this is, I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. This is what he is said to think. The Prime Minister justifiably frustrated the policy announcements this week on cancer treatment, breakfast clubs, that one again, and the government's Pride in Place initiative, barely covered by a media obsessed with what he calls the political game in which they have become accustomed to getting a new entrant into Downing Street every couple of years. Does the Prime Minister honestly think, in the current circumstances, Maxwell, that we are going to sit here on a Sunday morning and talk about the 17th announcement on breakfast clubs? What planet is he on? He appointed someone who was best pals, his own words, with a paedophile, who then lied about it.
Well, I think this is the great irony, is that our chief politician is just terrible at politics. And he's also supposed to be a man of great reason and understanding, and he can really read into a situation. And he's hopeless at that as well. I'm not sure what the purpose of his ministry is at the end of the day. Coming down to the question...
I don't know what he believes. Well, I'm 18 months in, I don't know what he believes. Exactly.
That's always been a big issue. I also think, when we come back to the question, why was Mandelson appointed? Doing a lot of reading around this, so we can see that McSweeney was the one who put his foot down.
Yeah, chief of staff.
Chief of staff, put his foot down over the Prince of Darkness. And then Starmer, for some reason, went into this kind of due diligence process. I mean, I've done some, due diligence before. It feels like it's a bit more than a Google, to be honest, and that's all you have to do. Yes. And I think also speaks really terribly of how the Prime Minister probably looks at our security services. They would have vetted Peter Mandelson.
Well, Peter Mandelson said he was only asked 3 questions, and you've got to say, hold on a second, if you're Keir Starmer, do you believe the security services, whose job it is to actually do this? They're not flawless as an institution, they make mistakes, but do you believe them, or do you believe Peter Mandelson? That goes absolutely to the heart of his judgment. Looking at what Gordon Brown said yesterday to the BBC, Luke, you mentioned briefly there about the anti-corruption side of things. We did talk about that on yesterday's programme with the professor who deals with these things. Do you think that would make any difference? Do you think that would have meant this didn't go ahead? Because the procedures that were meant to have followed, such as vetting, didn't actually happen until after Peter Mandelson was appointed.
I almost felt sorry for front-bench Labour MPs this week, who had to seriously come out and say, well, he lied during screening. What screening for, other than to identify a lie?
Yes.
It's not just asking someone a question and accepting their answer.
Oh, well, you say you're a great guy, so let's make you ambassador to America.
Exactly. It's like, what is screening for if not to catch these sorts of instances? It's just completely bizarre. And they've had to come out and say, well, there's a problem with the process. Well, it doesn't look like a process at all. It doesn't look like there was any screening. It looks like it was completely artificial. So... Will more law work? I mean, I guess is the question. The answer is no. Our anti-bribery laws, we can come on to talk about this, are very, very strong at the moment. We have a very, very robust set of legislation to deal with bribery, with corruption. We're actually absolutely swamped in this stuff. But as was said before, this was a question of political judgment. It was absolutely clear that Mandelson was a completely improper candidate for this position. And the fact is that this was a McSweeney call, Morgan McSweeney, his chief of staff. And people are saying now, well, what if Morgan McSweeney goes and maybe Keir Starmer can survive without him? There is no political project whatsoever without Morgan McSweeney. He is Keir Starmer, effectively. Keir Starmer is a convenient vehicle for the ideas of Morgan McSweeney.
Well, it's interesting, if you read that brilliant book by Patrick Aguirre and Gabriel Pogrund, Get In, which honestly, if you want to understand Labour at the moment, you've got to read it, who says that essentially there were people sitting in a room. I can't remember if Wes Streeting was there. I know Lisa Nandy was there, Roger Liddell, who's a lord, and Morgan McSweeney were sitting there thinking, right, who's the vehicle going to be? And they essentially chose Keir Starmer. But we'll maybe get into this a little bit more as time goes on. Maxwell, do you think that Starmer can survive without Morgan McSweeney, and what do you think people think of him?
I think he can survive without Morgan McSweeney, but he's not going to be strong, right? I mean, I always see it as, you know, McSweeney behind the scenes, Rachel Reeves being the kind of Kevlar vest he wears to take a hit every time something goes terribly wrong with the economy, which seems to be every 30 seconds. And then, you know, Starmer's in the middle waving his hands around. I think that's how this functions. I think he can survive, but I don't see it past May, to be honest, because those May elections are going to be a total wipeout for Labour. You know, speaking to friends of mine who are involved in the Labour Party in London, they're not expecting much good out of this. You know, a lot of people.
What do they say about Morgan McSweeney?
So I had a chat with someone who's very well connected to these issues, who's quite well known in the public sphere. I'm not going to say their name, but you know, I said to him, 90% of Labour MPs, you know, hate Morgan McSweeney. And he went, that is preposterous. There are way more than that.
Yeah,
and it's like, my God, he's just in a terrible position. So in order for Starmer to save his skin, he needs to get rid of McSweeney. There's no other way around this.
We'll maybe talk more about that in a second. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Damon from Wigan, who says if Ed Miliband became Prime Minister, we'll talk about that too, exclusive report in The Sun, Ed Miliband, I plan to replace Starmer as leader. If Ed Miliband becomes Prime Minister, we would be the laughing stock of the whole universe, and that is no joke, says Damon. I can't believe there's only Ed or Angela to choose from. What does the political system come to? I would rather have Larry the cat in charge, because he has done more the job before and has had more brain cells than those two put together. Do you know, actually, this Sunday next week, Larry will have been at Downing Street for 15 years. It's about time someone wrote a book about him. Stay with us here on Talk.
Can he continue and can he be trusted to keep the country safe? Because he ignored MI6 warnings as well. So what was the calculation that made him avoid, you know, say there's a risk, but I'm going to go ahead anyway? That has to be answered. But I mean, the first duty of any government is to keep us safe. And he appointed someone who he knew. I mean, he's called the Prince of Darkness, for Christ's sake. I might call him Captain Underpants now.
Yeah.
But
Captain Dirty Underpants.
Yeah.
They're not very clean. Who is that woman?
Can we trust Starmer to keep the country safe?
No.
No.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody in touch. Chris in Northumberland. Peter, I don't believe Lammy warned about Mandy at all. I don't think Lammy thinks about much more than what he's having for lunch. Anything else is beyond him. Well, he certainly thinks about his own ego. Sean in Gloucester says, geez, Mastermind Lammy could be Prime Minister if Keith Stalin steps down. Heaven forbid. Joanna in Salisbury. Hi, Cardi P. I just loved Lammy's reasoning for why Peter Mandelson was the right man for ambassador in the US. There were all the jobs he got fired from in disgrace. It's a very good point, Joanna. This is David Lammy, Deputy Prime Minister, Celebrity Mastermind contestant, saying that he warned Keir Starmer. He said, Peter Mandelson, not the right man. Let's just remind ourselves what he said at the time.
Peter Mandelson is a man of considerable expertise. He's the right man for this moment to be our ambassador. He's been a business secretary, a Northern Ireland secretary. Of course, he's worked in the European Commission, and he brings all of that to bear working as our ambassador in the United States. And of course, he's looking forward to presenting his credentials to Donald Trump.
That's the man a heartbeat away from being Prime Minister. David Lammy, I know we've played that clip 3 times, but I think it's just a really good illustration of the hypocrisy of politics. If this is true, if David Lammy was warning behind the scenes that Peter Mandelson was the wrong person, if he is this great seer, if he was this great, amazing person who realised there were going to be all sorts of problems with Peter Mandelson, I mean, a blind man and a galloping horse could have told you that someone who'd left government twice, with two very serious scandals. One was a loan from Jeffrey Robertson, which he didn't declare, which is basically illegal. And the second one was passports, giving dodgy passports for the Hinduja brothers. So this was Peter Mandelson who'd left twice. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Keir Starmer thought it was fine. David Lammy, at the time, said he was the best man to be ambassador. Jackie's been in touch and says Starmer and McSweeney are to blame. The question we're asking this morning is who is to blame for the Mandelson scandal? Scandalson, as we're now calling him. Starmer and McSweeney are to blame. McSweeney is a protege of Mandelson, says Jackie, whose wife is overseeing the Chagos deal, and Starmer's buddies Hermer and Philippe Sands with Starmer had already agreed the deal with Mauritius before he became Prime Minister. Then Mandelson, who was picked to charm Trump to get the Chagos deal through, Jackie thinks. Oh, and don't forget the Mauritian PM who was convicted of money laundering. It stinks and needs a criminal investigation. Well, Jackie, thank you for that. There are loads of people getting in touch. Another person says every time you see Lammy talking, you can hear the water lapping around his nostrils, and he is on his tiptoes, an arresting image there. We're on the debate desk with Maxwell Marlowe and Luke Gittos, and just to say, we've got two top politicians coming a little bit later on in the programme. Alex Burghardt, who is the shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. He is on Kemi Badenoch's top team, often called Kemi's brain. He will be with us a little bit later on this hour. We're also going to speak to Carl Turner, the backbencher, who on Friday told me that Morgan McSweeney had to go. Well, he's still there, so we'll see what Carl thinks now and what he's been saying to his contemporaries and fellow Labour MPs. Maxwell Marlowe and Luke Gittos, as I say, are with me on the debate desk. Do you think, actually on that point about anti-corruption, Maxwell, would it make a difference what Gordon Brown has been talking about yesterday on the BBC, these anti-corruption ethics commission and so on? I mean, if a Prime Minister wants to do something, they can just do it.
They can just do it, and I think this is the remarkable thing. When it comes to what Mandelson was doing, though, I mean, the thing that came out in the files when Mandelson was literally got an email from Number 10, and his first thought, without even reading the email, was send it to Jeffrey Epstein immediately. No laws would have stopped him doing that at all. I don't think he was thinking about consequence apart from what would happen in Jeffrey Epstein's back pocket fundamentally. So whether or not he could
and perhaps Peter Mandelson's back pocket as well. And speaking of that, actually, the big story in the Sunday Times today is that he received a taxpayer-funded payoff worth up to £55,000. What do you think of that?
I'm not surprised. That's it's just standard practice.
Mm-hmm.
If you get sacked from the civil service, you get a payoff, or you get promoted. That's it. They move you up. Not in Mandelson's case here. There's not much further to go than British ambassador to Washington. But I'm not surprised by this at all. Should he give it back with interest?
Mm-hmm.
With interest, RPI specifically.
I was in the work in the civil service for 3.5 years as a special advisor. I wasn't a civil servant, but I was a special advisor. There was one particular civil servant I worked with pretty closely, and my Secretary of State worked with pretty closely. That person wasn't good at their job, wasn't doing the job they were asked to do. What happened?
Promoted
and moved to another department. Yeah. Literally moved up. Yeah, that's what happened.
Remarkable.
That person earned more money because they weren't doing the job we had asked that person to do. Luke, on the money?
Give it back. Obviously, I think the vast majority of your listeners will find it disgusting that he is taking more taxpayers' money in light of this scandal. So I think the money's important. I think he should give it back. But I think it's worth just taking a step back here and looking at because we were talking about the machinations around the leadership. And it is quite remarkable to remember that Keir Starmer fairly recently won a very big majority in this country and should be riding very high as a political leader at the moment. But he's just singularly failed to create any kind of impact with anything that he's done with this majority. Talk about David Lammy. As a criminal justice professional, I'm coming off the back of David Lammy's attempted reforms to the jury system, which have gone down like a bucket of cold sick.
Well, we're talking to Carl Turner a little bit later on that. He's not massively happy with it.
Because they don't work. I mean, the proposal that he came up with would not work and was not thought through, was not consulted
and wasn't going to solve the backlog.
Was not going to solve the backlog, was not going to do anything good. So, the idea of David Lammy as Prime Minister is completely ridiculous, and I think most people would recognise it as ridiculous. But it speaks to the kind of failure of the Starmer project, really, because with a majority like this, he had an opportunity to do something. And when he came in, there was this sort of sigh of relief from the middle-class bourgeois voters who said, oh, well, grown-ups are back in the room. That was the big claim. And if you remember that the Sky News, do you remember that moment when the majority was announced, and there was sort of these strange cries from the Sky newsroom? It's sort of like there was this cry of sort of orgasmic pleasure at the idea that Starmer got such a big majority. And I think Starmer has always tried to play to that kind of middle-class professional audience. He thinks of himself as speaking to the professional middle class in this country. That's who he wants to appeal to. He wants to give an impression of competence. He wants to give forensic was the word that was always talked about with Keir Starmer. He was forensic, and he was going to bring robust opposition, and then a robust leadership. But it's really hard to talk about the successes of his government now, because he's so singularly failed to bring a political vision.
What about breakfast clubs, Luke? Come on.
Breakfast clubs. You know.
I really, every time I interview a government minister, I sometimes actually say, can you talk about the good things we've done without mentioning breakfast clubs? I don't think any of the three of us want children to be hungry when they go to school. Yeah. But if you have the colossal power of being Prime Minister of a G7 nation, you're literally talking to the President of the United States probably every week. And the number one thing you can say out of 18 months of government is we've set up a few breakfast clubs.
Do you think Donald Trump knows about the breakfast clubs? He must know by now.
But the point you make, Luke, about the forensic nature, the process, the detail. I'm Mr. Detail, I'm Mr. Rules. Where was the detail? Where was the rules? Where was the process? Where was the forensic look at this when he was appointing Peter Mandelson?
But this is why I also think it strikes at the heart of him personally, because he was the kind of person who would not think of himself making this kind of judgment.
Yes.
And he must be absolutely kicking himself in the best, and probably far worse. I just think now is the time for him to recognise that all through this period, all through the period of his majority, he's tried to claim a position on the basis of legal competence.
Yeah.
He's a lawyer.
Yeah.
He's someone who is, thinks of himself as on top of the law, on top of the procedures, on top of the processes.
The rule of law being important, and international law being important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, we could talk about his international position as well, because he is someone who prefers, in his own words, Davos to Westminster.
Well, he clearly wants a job like head of NATO or head of the UN or something like that. He clearly sees this as a stepping stone to one of those jobs. Just on what you said a second ago, Carl Turner, who we're speaking to a little bit later on in the programme, he's the Labour MP who's Starmer's friend, he keeps saying, but he's been very critical of him. Of David Lammy, Carl Turner has said, I think this morning, he said, don't doubt it, but the Prime Minister would have been fully entitled to take his advice with a pinch of salt from Dave. I mean, he used to believe in the right to a jury trial until he pretended he didn't anymore. So there we are. Your thoughts?
I was going to say, Anna Soubry. Who remembers Anna Soubry?
I remember Anna Soubry, the conservative-ish MP.
TIG, the Independent Group of Change. Do you remember when Starmer won his majority? I think she said, "It's nice, isn't it? The quiet." It's just how that has backfired. So I see it every week on X. But my other question is, given this is all foreign affairs, where's Yvette Cooper? Where is the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs? Yeah. I think it's absolutely remarkable. Now, I may be correct in saying that David Lammy was Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs when Mandelson was appointed.
Correct. Yeah.
Why didn't he have the veto over this? It's his ministry, and with Mandelson obviously being a representative of the Crown, he is a civil servant, or was a civil servant at that time. There is nothing we've heard about this. So he's gone out on the front page of the Telegraph. Why hasn't he said anything more? Why hasn't he said more about what it was like going on inside? I know it doesn't fit into a column, but I think at the end of the day...
Well, in fairness, as friends of David Lammy, he hasn't quite said it himself. He apparently does have some friends. The interesting point on all of that, I think you're right to say about Lammy. I mean, success has many fathers, failures an orphan, and they're running away from this decision, but they're also running away from Keir Starmer.
Oh, definitely. He's very lonely at the moment. We've seen over the weekend he's on his what's called a kind of charm offensive up at Chequers with all of these MPs, because he knows the game's up, and he knows that most of the cabinet just don't like him anymore. That they're messing up their big policy programmes. This Pride and Play scheme, for example, was out of MHCLG, the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. That's Steve Reed's thing, and yet Starmer chose to front it by saying, this is about me, I'm going to mention Mandelson for the first half, and all the questions will be about Mandelson. His cabinet are just running
away. And threw that away.
It.
I mean, that is major stuff. And, £10 billion of funding for Pride in Place, which is essentially the same as Levelling Up. I mean, it's a repackaged version of Levelling Up. But that could it's the boring bit of government, but it could make a real difference to people's lives. It could revitalise high streets. It could do some serious things. But of course, why didn't he just say, do you know what, this is a major announcement, this is important, we're going to leave this until this scandal is over, we're going to put this down the road for a while, and I'm going to front up the Mandelson stuff, I'm going to do it from Downing Street, I'm going to take questions on that. Again, judgment, Luke.
Well, it's the Pride and Place stuff I was looking into, and it actually looks as though there was some really positive measures in there, and also some kind of political message. It seemed to be moving, at least presenting something of a political project. But do you remember his Island of Strangers speech? Yeah. The speech that he made, and then everyone said, oh, hang on, he's making a point about immigration here. He's actually expressing a political idea. What did he do 2 or 3 weeks later? Completely disowned the speech and said, actually, I shouldn't have said that. So the idea that he is a man of detail and he is a man of who is competent in politics, I think is totally overstated, because actually he can't stand by any political idea that he puts forward. So, maybe these new announcements contain something interesting, but with Starmer, it's never clear that he's actually going to hold on to any of the ideas.
And he said he wasn't actually in control of that process. He said his brother had died, his mind was elsewhere, he was handed a speech and he read it. Which, look, I've absolute sympathy for a family tragedy. The point as well is the Prime Minister shouldn't be reading something that he's just told to do. He should be in control of that process. He's got to take personal responsibility, even in those horrible circumstances. Tad in Cambridge has been in touch and said, David Lammy tells us everything we need to know about Britain's failing university system. How on earth did someone like him get to where he is? Box ticking, sure it wasn't merit. He'll be telling us next that Pope Pius XII was the Lord Protector of England and Mary Poppins was with the 82nd Airborne. Well, she did have that umbrella. Thank you to Dawn, who said, from Lincolnshire, he says, I'm not defending Starmer, but the other advantage to breakfast clubs is it allows parents to get jobs and start earlier in the morning. Yeah, I'm not against breakfast clubs at all. They're not a bad idea, although I do think we do need to start telling parents to take a bit more responsibility and not send their kids to school without being, things like being able to use a knife and fork, things like being able to write your name, count to 10, not being nappies. Maybe that's not a bad idea. But Dawn, your point is a very, very good one, and I totally accept it. But if that's it, if that's the only thing you've done, really, or the only main thing you've done, they talk about waiting lists. Well, there are lots of questions about how those figures happen, and people die and come off waiting lists anyway. Phil says, who's to blame? Anyone who voted Labour. Starmer has been a dangerous disaster. Any of the B team, Rayner, Miliband, Lammy, etc., would increase the level of dangerous disaster by at least a factor of 10. Good show with great guests, says Phil. Thank you for that. Well, not only are Luke Gittos and Maxwell Marlowe with us in the debate desk, but we're also going to speak to Alex Burghart from the Conservatives very soon, also Carl Turner from Labour, and we'll reflect on what the Welfare Secretary has been saying as well with both of them. Loads more to come. Stay with us here on Talk, and get your call in too. Let me know what you think. Get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Lee in Rugby. Says, hi Cardi P, hi Lee. The point is MI5 and MI6 know everything about everyone that works in government. Anyone who has access to national security info, their sexual proclivities are all taken into consideration as to what's the possibility of them being compromised. It's absolutely gaslighting nonsense that Starmer didn't know. As usual, they treat us like serfs, as if we are thick, says Lee. I want the US ambassador job, Keir. Please appoint me, or else, says John. Barry says, great show, Peter. Why does anyone who has been sacked nowadays expect a payoff? They aren't all football managers. I'm very worried that City Cannes Met Police will kick this investigation into the long grass. We were told yesterday by one of the deputy assistant commissioners that it's going to be long and complex. I mean, I'm happy with it being complex because it takes a while to assemble all the evidence, and there's a lot of evidence to assemble and stuff we don't know yet that's going to come out of government, but they can't take too long. They can't just take forever on this. Why isn't the House of Commons carrying out its own investigation? Well, that's a very good point as well. Loads of good points. I want to just we'll talk loads about Mandelson in this programme, and if you want to get your point on the air, please do send them in. Send me a voice note. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Tommy's on the phone today. You have a quick chat with him, and then we'll get you on as soon as we can. We'll get as many calls on between now and 1 o'clock as we can. Couple of other things around as well. One very interesting story. We're going to speak to this dude later on, actually. Fayaz Mughal, the founder of Tell Mama, a project that records anti-Muslim incidents in the UK, raising concerns publicly last year that ministers were failing to take seriously the threat of Islamic extremism. He was actually saying, hold on a second, you do more on this. Now he's accusing the Home Office of attempting to silence him. Luke, tell us more about this story.
Well, it seems that Fayaz Mughal came out with an article in the Telegraph and was effectively told to back off by senior figures, and you wonder what planet these people are living on, because it's clear from his perspective that Islamist extremism is a primary threat, and that's something that we actually don't talk about enough.
We're going to talk about it with him later on. We should say a little bit later on in the programme. We never shy away from these issues.
Yeah, so and it's extremely important that we talk about it. You know, there is a lot of focus on extremism particularly within this government, but Islamist extremism is the word that, the word they seem frightened to use. They're very happy to talk about right-wing extremism, very happy to talk about different forms of extremism other than Islamist extremism. And Islamism is different to other forms of extremism because it has a very solid national basis. It's a movement that exists in the Middle East. It has a great deal of influence over here. It's well funded. It's well organised. It has a presence on our streets, in our universities, and it has real political power. You know, and the reason why people don't want to talk about it, and Mr. Mughal mentions this in his piece today in the Telegraph, in his discussion in the Telegraph, is that mainstream parties don't want to offend Muslim voters. That is the most insulting thing to say to Muslim voters, that we're too worried to talk about Islamist extremism because we're scared we're going to lose the mainstream Muslim vote. The vast majority of Muslims in this country loathe Islamist extremism and are the biggest victims of Islamist extremism. In any country where Islamism is a force, mainstream Muslims suffer. So the parties in this country need to get a grip on this and recognise that this is not something that mainstream Muslims are worried about talking about. They're actively wanting to talk about it. This is a good example. And the idea that you would not talk about it for offending Muslim voters, I think, is insulting and needs to be moved beyond.
Your thoughts, Max?
I'd be absolutely with you. I mean, what I find absolutely baffling, of course, is that we haven't prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood yet, which is one of the largest funders.
Or the IRGC.
Or the IRGC. So I'm not sure how the government think they're dealing with this sort of problem. Nadeem Zahawi, who's a patron of the Adam Smith Institute, Just Under Reform, he has been campaigning out for so long. He was born in Iraq, he fled Saddam Hussein, he's very close to the Middle East people, and when he goes to meetings he says, I'm told all the time, why haven't you prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood? Why haven't you prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood? And he can't get his head around it. And actually I was speaking to someone who works in Washington DC, quite close to the State Department, and they're starting to think that the Home Office is now infiltrated by people who work with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Wow.
It's gotten that bad. And so I can see why Mr. Mughal here has been so thrown by
and we're going to talk to him a little bit later on. Another story worthy of comment is about prison guards scared to put extremists in solitary. Why is this happening, Maxwell?
I don't know. I mean, given the amount of prison guards who end up having sex with prisoners. I'm not sure why the solitary thing's a huge problem, to be honest. But
a lot of them are attacked as well.
No, that's a good point. But I can see why this is a huge issue. We've just lost control of our prisons entirely. There was a great story out, it was a while ago, but you hear about it quite a lot nowadays, is prison guards who have to sleep in tents outside of the prisons because they're not being paid enough in order to, in order to look after said prisoners.
It's absurd. On changes in immigration law, which mean that they often can't afford to stay in the country. Luke?
Well, it's always worth mentioning human rights in this context, because human rights law is a massive influence in this area. We've just seen a murderer awarded significant compensation because he was put into solitary confinement for a long period of time.
We covered that story,
yeah. And the prison weren't able to do the right checks, and so he was found to have had his human rights breached. So there is a nervousness, I think, among prison authorities that when putting someone in solitary confinement, they have to do everything legally, they have to do everything by the book, and I think that really does restrict their judgment. And that creates an absolute hellish situation. If you look at some of the prisons in this country at the moment, you see very frequently reports as to how Islamists are getting together, they're recruiting, they're working on vulnerable prisoners, they're bringing them in, recruiting them, and it's becoming a hothouse of Islamist extremism in our prisons.
It's a major problem. We will talk to the Shadow Cabinet Minister, Alex Burghardt, in just a second, not just about these issues, but of course about Peter Mandelson too. Stay with us here on Talk and give us your reaction. 0344 499 1000.
So there's some people in society who believe that, the flag is the symbol of the country, we should be proud of it, we should wave it, and, I'm one of those. People who are apologists for the British Empire, for apologists for how we've been in the past, and it's almost a symbol of national shame to them. It's kind of like, well, we flew that flag. Oh, I'm not sure about this one.
The whole national shame thing, I believe that actually that's a sort of a greater agenda going on, to be honest with you. It's apologist nature of of so many successive governments now who have sort of almost been forced to be embarrassed by our great British history.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's speak now to Alex Burghardt, the Shadow Cabinet Minister. He's Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and also Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Very close to Kemi Badenoch and joins us now. Good morning, Alex.
Hi, Peter. How are you doing?
There are many problems for the Prime Minister at the moment. Some have suggested that a no-confidence vote should be brought in the House of Commons. Would you go that far?
Yeah, what Kemi said on Thursday, following her kind of demolition of the Prime Minister at PMQs, Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday, was that if people on the Labour backbenches want to come and talk to our whips about supporting a no-confidence vote, then we'll bring one forward. It's something that the Leader of the Opposition can do. But, look, obviously, it's down to Labour MPs. There's a big Labour majority in the House at the moment. We're not going to bring forward a motion unless we think people will support it. But we're, we think that the Prime Minister's position is untenable, and it's time for them to sort it out.
Pat McFadden, who is the Welfare Secretary, says that the Prime Minister acted in good faith over Mandelson. Do you believe him?
Well, look, what does that even mean, right? The fact is that Keir Starmer, under questioning from Kemi Badenoch on Wednesday, revealed that he had been briefed officially that Mandelson had maintained his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein's conviction for paedophilia, and that he carried on taking Epstein's hospitality. And it wasn't the only thing, that was what we talked about in the Commons, but it wasn't the only thing that we now know was raised with the Prime Minister. It was raised, the fact that Mandelson had been fired twice, that was raised with him as a big red flag, but also Mandelson's business dealings, which his big company, Global Counsel, that he set up, we now know with Jeffrey Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's help, that Global Counsel had these business dealings in Russia and in China that the government, that Whitehall was very concerned by too. There's no way that the Prime Minister should have appointed Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to Washington, given the official briefing that he'd been given. But he went ahead and did it anyway. I don't think we can trust his judgment ever again, and I think the Labour Party is waking up to the fact that it can't trust his judgment ever again.
Is it his judgment, or is it Morgan McSweeney's judgment, and should Morgan McSweeney go?
Look, and Morgan McSweeney, who's Peter Mandelson's protege, very obviously gave the Prime Minister bad advice. But ultimately, responsibility rests with the Prime Minister. It's politicians who have to decide these things, and he saw the evidence and he made the wrong call. And so it's on him. It's not just Morgan McSweeney now, it's the Prime Minister.
On your own party, there have been many people who have been talking about this, who've been coming out and talking in the media. For example, David Lammy today saying that he warned Keir Starmer about this, despite praising Peter Mandelson at various points when he was appointed. I just wonder, with the shakedown in the Labour Party, if Keir Starmer does go either in the short or longer term, who would you like to be leader of the Labour Party? Who would be the easiest person for the Conservatives to oppose? David Lammy, Ed Miliband?
I think that we will be able to take any of them on. I think Kemi will be able to take any leader of the Labour Party on, because the truth is, Peter, they just got the facts of life wrong. Their whole economic strategy is disastrous. Unless they change that, it doesn't matter who you change at the top. You can put anybody in. If they have the fundamentals wrong, and it seems that the Labour Party's view of the world is wrong, we're just going to have more of the same. So I don't care who takes over. I just think that this Prime Minister has put himself in a position where we can't trust him anymore, we can't trust his judgment anymore, and there's going to have to be a change.
Turning to your own party, is there going to be a shadow cabinet reshuffle soon? Is Mel Stride going to get dumped?
I don't think so. I mean, it's up to Kemi whether there's a reshuffle or not, and what she does with it. And I hope I get to keep my job. But I noticed that Kemi did an interview in the Telegraph today where she praised Mel. So we've got a really good team. And there's a high degree of trust in the shadow cabinet, which is a wonderful thing. We have open.
Is there a high degree of trust?
And we have a really.
I'm not sure there's a high degree of trust in the shadow cabinet from our viewers and listeners, to be brutally honest, Alex. And in the polls, you're doing slightly better, but you're still around 20%. If there's an election tomorrow, despite all of Labour's difficulties, people are listening to Reform UK and they're not listening to you. Is that not the case?
No, I think that's unfair. I know obviously Reform's got a bit of a lead, but there are also a lot of people who are undecided, and I don't think there is going to be an election tomorrow, and most people know that. And there's not going to be an election for over 3 years, and I'm very confident that by the time we get to that point, people will have continued to appreciate that Kemi Badenoch is what the future looks like, that her honesty and integrity and her strength of character, and with the great policy platform that she's building.
I mean, Reform UK have been ahead.
Costs, reducing tax, and getting growth.
Reform UK have been ahead in over 100 polls. Do you honestly think the Conservatives are going to overtake them? I mean, the local elections are going to be bad for Labour, but they're going to be bad for you as well, are they not?
There's a very long time until the next general election.
Not till the locals.
There's plenty of time for people to. There's plenty of time between now and the next general election for people to understand that Nigel Farage is trying to sell the country the moon on a stick, that his sums don't add up. We had an announcement last week, simple announcement, which had a £10 billion black hole. That's something that Mel Stride pointed out, by the way. £10 billion black hole in it. Every time they come up forward, it turns out that it falls apart at the first available moment. That happened in general election. They made a whole bunch of problems in the general election. They've now retracted them because they didn't add up. Look, fundamentally, in the next election, the country is going to have to decide whether it wants more Labour, which I don't think it will, or it's going to have to decide whether it wants a party of Reform, good campaigners, but economic policy doesn't add up, or a Conservative party that is absolutely determined to reduce government spending, get the debt under control, cut people's taxes, get growth, and put a bit of fire in the belly of the country again. And I have every confidence that Kemi and the party are going to be able to do that over the course of the next 3 years.
I have absolutely no doubt that you believe what you're saying, Alex, but what we know is that Suella Braverman doesn't believe it, Robert Jenrick doesn't believe it, and Andrew Rossendale doesn't believe it. They may only have 8 MPs, but you've had 3 defections in the last month.
Yeah, well, let's look at those defections, right? And on a personal level, I have nothing against any of them. I've enjoyed their company, and I'm sad they've gone. But we all know why Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman have left the Conservative Party. It's not about policy. They couldn't identify any policy where they disagree with what we're doing at all. They left the Conservative Party because they didn't become leader of the Conservative Party. And that means that Nigel is going to have to watch his back now, because they're not going there to carry his bag. They're going to go and carry on the same games they were playing in the Conservative Party of trying to take over. They'll try and take over Reform. It adds to the roster of the people at the top of Reform who don't like each other. Rob Jenrick and Zia Youssef hate each other.
They went for dinner recently.
And also...
It was all smiles after that.
Yeah. It was all smiles for the camera. They don't like each other, Peter. And then the third thing is that Farage is trying to convince the country that he's building this new political party, but he's actually just filling it with failed Conservatives. So I just don't... it's sad for me that these people have gone, but
is Robert Jenrick really a field?
It's not good for Reform.
Is Robert Jenrick really a field Conservative? I think look at his video. Hold on a second. Look at his video on fare dodgers, for example. 25 million people viewed that. That has had arguably at least as much of an impact as anything Kemi Badenoch's done.
Kemi Badenoch just put the Prime Minister in a position where his position is no longer credible. That's really serious opposition. Yeah, Rob's made some good videos. He failed to become leader of the Conservative Party, and he left because he wasn't prepared to be part of a team. Didn't leave over policy. So, look, Kemi Badenoch is the person who all of this week has been making the running against this failing Labour government. She is the one that's held Keir Starmer's feet to the fire. She's the one that forced a 6-hour debate on the government. It's going to mean that they have to cough up a whole load of documents. Yeah, it's her work, and I have no doubt in my mind that as time goes by, people see more of that. They'll know that the Conservatives are to be most trusted on the economy, at a time when Labour's wrecking the economy, and they'll see that Kemi Badenoch is without doubt the best leader for the next generation.
Thank you, Alex. That is Alex Burkhardt there from the Conservatives. He is the Shadow Cabinet Minister, Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary. Thank you for joining us this morning, Alex. What did you think, Luke?
Well, I think at least there's a recognition from Alex Burkhardt that Reform and Labour are the competition at the moment. Most people have forgotten who Kemi Badenoch is over the last few months. So that's something that...
She's making more of an impact now. He has a fair point with that.
She is, but for a long period she was totally absent from the debate, and the only stories that were made about the Tories were the defections that you talked about. There is a groundswell of public support for Reform at the moment. Reform is a vehicle for something which is exciting within the electorate, which is a desire for real, genuine shake-up of the political system. We're now in a situation where a party that didn't exist a number of years ago is now leading the two main parties. That means breaking up an electoral consensus that's existed in this country for 150 years. That's hugely positive. But you don't have to like Nigel Farage to recognise that when voters are able to express their discontent with the Westminster system, when they're able to break apart political orthodoxy on the basis of their democratic vote, that is a good thing. So we're now faced a situation where I think he's also got some good points about Reform can't just become a storing house for old Tories. But, in Robert Jenrick's case, there was a clear ideological difference between him and the mainstream of the Tory party, which was crystallised around leaving the European Convention.
I thought that line. Rob's made some good videos. He failed to become leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, marvellously brutal. Your thoughts, Maxwell?
Alex has had his shreddies this morning. He's always on message. It's always good. He was quite impressive. And he's right to point out that Reform have some mathematical problems with their policies. Their pub policy they announced last week, he's right, does have a £10 billion black hole right in the middle of it because they haven't done the maths correctly on this sort of stuff, the sort of stuff that I know the Conservative Party is doing. But you are absolutely right to point out, Peter, they're only on 20%. Alex said, Reform are a bit ahead. They're not. They're on 30%.
Yeah,
that is a huge difference.
It's more than a bit. We're actually talking about pubs very, very soon on this programme. We're talking about whether Nigel Farage can save pubs, whether Labour gets it, really understands what needs to happen given all the pressures that are on them. There are some other elements of regarding pubs that will be affected by recent legislation that you've been looking into, Maxwell.
Absolutely. So the Employment Rights Act, which they've got two main areas, and just to give a bit of context, if I can very quickly, the Resolution Foundation, of which Torsten Bell, who's now a government minister, used to run.
His actual name is Torsten Henriksen Bell, but he shortened it to Torsten Bell to be less posh.
Absolutely. But, they had a point of policy a few years ago which said that the government needs to consider which sectors can't grow anymore. They highlighted hospitality. Move on. Now, Torsten's now in government. Rachel Reeves announces national insurance increases, which massively hit pubs. Business rates relief, not really there. I mean, I know there's been a bit of a U-turn, we're not really sure where that's happening. And then we see the Employment Rights Act, which has just come through. Clause 20 of it says that landlords are liable for anything their patrons say. So if they say something hate speechy, the landlord gets the hit from the plod. And then there's also the mandatory trade union access, which means trade unions have basically the right to come into your place of work, including pubs. But remember, most pubs are small, medium-sized enterprises. We've done some analysis of that at the Adam Smith Institute. We found that's going to cost the SMEs as a whole around £600 million per year. It's devastating. I don't think Labour like the pub at all, and I think they're on an ideological mission to basically wind them up.
We will look into that a little bit later on in the programme. We've got a pub landlord who's written two very interesting articles about this, one on Nigel Farage and his plan, and one on what the government thinks about this. For the meantime, thank you both very, very much indeed, Luke Gaytos and Maxwell Marlowe. Just one final question. What can we read in to the fact that you've shaved off your moustache?
I think it shows that my capacity for hair growing is not so good.
Do you look more or less? Actually, maybe I can ask you this: does he look more or less like Jacob Rees-Mogg's son without the moustache?
Well, I think it's a welcome. I mean, I don't know what the moustache thing is with young men these days.
Sensitive young men thing. Sensitive young men.
It's the Movember thing, is it?
Yeah. It's now February, so time to move on. Listen, thank you both very, very much indeed. Luke Gaytos, the lawyer and writer, and Maxwell Marlowe, Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. In just a second, we're going to speak to Carl Turner, the Labour MP, friend of Keir Starmer, but a critic of him too. We're asking the question, who is to blame for the Mandelson scandal? Scandalson, hashtag Scandalson. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. In the next hour, we will definitely get some calls on the air, some voice notes as well. There are loads of ways to contribute, and I want to hear your voice on all the big stories of the day. 0344 499 1000, the only number you need.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. It is just after 11 o'clock. Loads to discuss here on Talk this morning. I'm here between now and 1 o'clock. Peter Mandelson, the scandal continues. More revelations today. David Lammy says that he warned Keir Starmer about it. Really? Well, he came out in the media and said that Peter Mandelson was the right man for the job. Pat McFadden, key lieutenant of Keir Starmer. He's the welfare secretary. He says, look, the Prime Minister has to take responsibility, but that he acted in good faith. That's something denied by Alex Burgard. He said, what does it even mean, Alex Burgard, for the Conservatives, who we spoke to a few minutes ago? There's loads on this. There's loads to get into in this, but we're covering other stories as well. The Home Office trying to silence an advisor who raised concerns about Islamism. This is a story very few people will touch. We will touch it because it's worth talking about, and it is a big issue affecting this country. We'll talk about Andrew as well, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the allegations that Epstein took a young Romanian model to a private dinner at Buckingham Palace. The scandal continues for the royals as well. And we'll speak to Rory Hanrahan later on. He's a pub landlord and a writer. Why the Labour Party loathe the pub is one of his articles. He also says, can Nigel Farage save the great British pub? We've had some criticism a few minutes ago that Nigel Farage's sums don't add up on all the different measures that he has taken to try to save British pubs, or at least wants to take, should he become Prime Minister and Reform UK get into government. There's loads to talk about this morning. I want to talk about it with you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, send them through. Tech Update will listen to them. We'll play out as many as we can on the main number. Use the main number as well to send me WhatsApp text messages. You can also give me a ring on the main number, which is of course 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking to Keir Starmer's friend, but also his critic, Carl Turner, the Labour MP. Let's see what he has to say in just a few minutes and be part of the conversation too here on Talk. Give me a shout about anything that's on the tip of your tongue between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us. Paul says Labour trying to kill off pubs which religious voters don't drink. Tony says the Tories are dead, they don't know it yet. Just two of the opinions that are coming into this newsroom today. We also know, of course, that the Department of Work and Pensions Secretary, Pat McFadden, he's been out in the media this morning speaking to Sky News. He says Prime Ministers have to take responsibility. This is what he said about the Mandelson scandal.
In the end, it's a Prime Ministerial, well, signed off by the King, but it's a Prime Ministerial appointment. And Prime Ministers have to take responsibility for the decisions that they make. I don't know the advice that was given, but in the end, it's a Prime Ministerial appointment. And I think the stuff about Morgan McSweeney is sort of beside the point. I believe that when the Prime Minister took the decision to make this appointment, he had no sense of Peter Mandelson's relationship with this man, as has been exposed in the last couple of weeks.
Well, that's interesting. He says he had no sense of his relationship with this man. But at Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, the Prime Minister said he knew that Peter Mandelson had stayed in contact with Jeffrey Epstein. So he may not know the full extent of it, but he knew something about it. So it doesn't quite seem that Pat McFadden's words add up there. What should happen to the Prime Minister? This is what Pat McFadden said.
I believe he should stay. I think he's got a 5-year mandate, which was just voted for 18 months or so ago. I also think it is not good for the country to change its Prime Minister every 18 months or 2 years. It's leading to chaos and uncertainty economically, politically and reputationally around the world. I think we should stick with the Prime Minister, support him. He admits he's made a bad mistake here. He has apologised for it. And I'm sure he will learn from that going forward.
And there's another big question this morning, and that is about the payoff that Peter Mandelson got after he was sacked as ambassador. It could be up to £55,000 just as a payoff for a job he had done for 7 months. He was sacked from that job. He got between £38,000 and £55,000. We don't know the exact figure, but we know he would have been on a high salary. He is a multi-millionaire. What should happen to the money? This is what Pat McFadden said.
That would be negotiated between him and his employers, who were the Foreign Office. So I don't know what was settled or agreed on that, but it would be a matter between them.
Morally, do you think he should pay this money back or give it to charity in the circumstances?
I think he probably should, yes. Either of those. Either give it back or give it to a charity, perhaps one involving violence against women and girls. I think taking a payoff in these circumstances, I don't think the public will think much of that.
Well, that was Pat McFadden there, the Welfare Secretary, speaking to Sky News a little bit earlier. Carl Turner is with us, the Labour MP for Kingston upon Hull. Carl says he is a friend of the Prime Minister. He contacts him very often, but he's also been a critic of what has happened over the last little while. Carl, good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
What do you make of what Pat McFadden has been saying there? I find it quite difficult to square what he's saying, because he says the Prime Minister didn't know the extent of Mandelson and Epstein's links. That may well be true, but he knew they were in contact. In fact, he admitted as such at Prime Minister's question. So is that actually a reasonable defence from Pat McFadden, do you think?
Well, I'm confused with what Pat is saying. I mean, I agree with an awful lot of it. I don't think the PM should be going for this. I don't think it's a capital offence. But the reality is, the Prime Minister did know that there was a continuing relationship. He admitted that much at the dispatch box when he was being questioned at PMQs by Kemi Badenoch. So, I mean, I don't know what Pat's saying. The Prime Minister shouldn't go, but neither should Max Sweeney. Well, who should be going then? Look, the advice, we know, Peter, that the advice that the Prime Minister has been getting, not just on this, but on a range of issues, from Max Sweeney has been crap advice. So who's got to go? Make your mind up. It's either the Prime Minister who goes or Max Sweeney. Well, I don't want the PM to go, because I agree with everything that Pat said about unstable government, the markets and everything else. And we don't want a contest in the Labour Party. The electorate will think we're barmy.
Although stability is not something that really exists at the moment. So even if there was a very unstable, I'm sure for many Labour members and Labour MPs and others, contest, maybe you'd get someone who could bring some stability and perhaps even some sort of electoral success for Labour, or things, or ameliorate things within the next 3 years. Is that not a tempting thing when, you know, David Lammy, for example, saying that he could in theory run?
Well, look, David's somebody I get on with. I used to get on with before the jury debacle. But I mean, it just fills me with dread, the idea that David Lammy all of a sudden thinks he can start to tell the truth about what advice he gave. Look, I don't doubt David Lammy would have been contacted about what he thought. He was the Foreign Secretary. It was a Foreign Office appointment. But why on earth is David Lammy coming out now to say, I warned the PM? I think the reality is David Lammy, who's the DPM, thinks he can be the PM. I mean, give it a rest, David. Goodness sake.
It's interesting with David Lammy, isn't it? Because he was the Foreign Secretary, as you say, he would have been consulted. He said he warned against it. But then he said this. Let's have a look at what he said to Sky News after Mandelson's appointment.
Peter Mandelson is a man of considerable expertise. He's the right man for this moment to be our ambassador. He's been a business secretary, a Northern Ireland secretary. Of course, he's worked in the European Commission, and he brings all of that to bear working as our ambassador in the United States. And of course, he's looking forward to presenting his credentials to Donald Trump.
Call me a cynic, Carl, but is it not a reasonable question to ask why on earth David Lammy would have said that to the media if he was warning against Peter Mandelson behind the scenes?
Well, he was the Foreign Secretary, had the responsibility of collective responsibility from in the Cabinet, so he has to say the things that he's expected to say as part of the government. But look, the Prime Minister was entitled to take from what David Lammy was saying with a big pinch of salt, really. I mean, this is the guy, David, who used to defend the right to jury trial until he didn't. I mean, honestly, these people need to button it now, really. They criticise me for coming out and speaking. I've got the PM's best interests at heart. I'm texting him at 6 o'clock this morning, the PM. You know, he knows where
Did he text back, Carl?
He didn't, to be fair, Peter, but the stuff I was saying was fairly contentious. I don't expect the Prime Minister to get into a conversation with me.
What were you telling him this morning?
I was saying, look, you've got a chance to survive here, but you've got to get him out the door. You know, get him out the door now.
McSweeney.
Oust him. McSweeney out the door now. He's a dangerous man. I mean, I'm going to say this. Look, honestly, he needs to be ousted fast. I think we should be potentially considering legislating to make sure that he not only walks out of Downing Street, but he goes out with a government health warning round his neck saying, don't come near government ever again. This guy is dangerous. He's leaked, he's briefed, he's done all sorts of stuff. His advice has been shocking. I'm sorry that the PM has taken his advice. He ought not to have done, but he did. Get him out of Downing Street fast.
But Carl, you know that advisors advise and ministers decide. I was a special advisor myself. I wanted to do a lot of things and my minister often said no. Starmer has to carry the can. He has to take responsibility here, doesn't he?
He does. Absolutely. You're dead right. Ministers make the decision. If look, I'm just a backbench MP, but if my senior parliamentary assistant says, this is what we ought to be doing, in my view, boss, and I choose to ignore that advice, and it transpires that the advice he gave me was bang on, it's my responsibility, and I'm not throwing him under a bus. But the reality is it's not a one-off, Peter. It's been continuation of advice. I tend to wonder whose side McSweeney was ever on, to be honest. Some of the stuff that we've been through, the Labour Party have been through the mill in the last 18 months, mainly as a result of the advice the PM's been taking. Consequences are the PM. He needs to face it, I agree. But do I think that the PM should be resigning? Absolutely categorically no, I don't. Please stay, but please mend the situation to the best you can.
What happens this week, Carl?
Well, I think McSweeney's got to go. I mean, if the PM's back on Wednesday in PMQs, the backbenches will be fairly rackers if the McSweeney is still in the job. I think that's the reality. The backbenches are in a terrible state. I was having messages yesterday from members of Parliament in northern seats that were out door knocking, that was being accused of all sorts of things that I cannot discuss at 11 o'clock in the morning on your programme. It was fairly graphic. I mean, honestly, we've got an unpopular government, an unpopular Prime Minister, and the reality is the backbenches of the Labour Party are cheesed off. Please take action, do it fast.
Do you think there could be more defections, perhaps, to Reform UK or to the Lib Dems or other parties if this doesn't get sorted?
I doubt that, if I'm honest with you. I do, honestly, I doubt it.
Okay.
You know, there is... the party that sort of tunes with the Labour Party is the Greens, really, politically. But, I mean, they're not going to save the country. That's the truth.
Okay.
So why would anybody cross the floor to the Greens?
Carl, listen, thanks for your thoughts today. Really interesting, talking about texting the Prime Minister there, giving him his unvarnished advice. That's Carl Turner there, who is the Labour MP for Kingston upon Hull. Thank you for joining us today. Just a bit of breaking news. The Met Office issuing a fresh weather warning for heavy rain. More than 200 flood alerts are still in place. The new yellow weather warning is for southwest England and parts of South Wales. It lasts from 12 noon on Monday to midnight. So that is most of tomorrow, or half of tomorrow anyway. It spans Cornwall to Portsmouth. Affected areas of Wales include Cardiff. Meanwhile, the Environment Agency has 88 flood warnings in place, mostly across southwest England and the East and West Midlands. There are also 223 flood alerts. Thank you to everyone who has been in touch, including Mary in County Down, who says, did anyone notice Pat McFadden's Weasley mention of the King when he said Keir Starmer approved of the appointment of Madison as ambassador to Washington? As he and everyone else well knows, the King technically signs off on government decisions and doesn't challenge them or refuse them. The Prime Minister was in possession of the full facts of Madison and his relationship with the paedophile Epstein. The King would not have been aware of this. We can all see exactly what McFadden is doing, a sneaky and cowardly attempt to implicate the King in a disgraceful, disastrous decision, says Mary. Jean in Southport says the payoff Mandelson received should be put back on the pot for the people who pay for the government's bills. The taxpayers were being ripped off on a daily basis by the government. Kaz in Bedford, of course, Kemi is the one holding Starmer's feet to the fire over Mandelson because she's currently the leader of the opposition. But imagine if Nigel Farage was at the dispatch box. I would love to see the day Farage and Starmer go head to head, but by the time Farage gets in power, Starmer will be long gone. Well, I think we will be hearing more from Nigel Farage at Prime Minister's Questions because they've got more MPs and the Speaker should be compelled to, well, it will be compelled to call them more. The smaller parties, of course, I think they're, obviously the Liberal Democrats have, I can't remember how many MPs the Liberal Democrats have, but I think it's 22, but certainly, 72, but the smaller parties, the ones with a few MPs, the DUP, the Greens and things like that, they have to be called at various points. So I think we'll hear more from Nigel Farage there. Ian in Wales says, if this was any other leader, all Labour MPs would be calling for their resignation and Starmer's voice would be the loudest. Thank you for that. Graham says, don't know who your Conservative minister was. That was Alex Burghardt. Don't really care when he said Youssef and Jenrick had been out to lunch recently. His response was yeah, which shows that they're still not listening to the electorate. And Robert in Chipping Barnet says Alex is delusional if he thinks the Tories will survive the next election. His dismissal of reform is mind-blowing. He's in for a major shock at the May elections, the local elections, says Robert in Chipping Barnet. So thank you for that. John's been back in touch and says, thank you for reading out my comment. However, you read it quickly, so you may have missed the point. To clarify, the or else comment refers to the possibility Peter Mandelson possesses sensitive information about Keir Starmer that he could use as leverage to secure the US ambassador appointment, says John. I'm not sure that would have necessarily been part of it, but of course with Peter Mandelson you just don't know. There's so much the police are now investigating. He says he hasn't done anything wrong. I think many people would beg to differ. We'll take your calls, text, tweets and voice notes after the break. We're also going to talk very soon about the fact that the Home Office apparently tried to silence an advisor over Islamism. We'll talk to that advisor in a few minutes' time. We'll also talk to you. If you want to get your voice on the air, 0344 499 1000.
So there's some people in society who believe that, the flag is the symbol of the country, we should be proud of it, we should wave it, and, I'm one of those. People who are apologists for the British Empire, for apologists for how we've been in the past, and it's almost a symbol of national shame to them. It's kind of like, well, we flew that flag. Oh, I'm not sure about this one.
The whole national shame thing, I believe that actually that's a sort of a greater agenda going on, to be honest with you. It's apologist nature of of so many successive governments now who have sort of almost been forced to be embarrassed by our great British history.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Lots of people sending in messages. JB in Aberdeenshire. Cardigan Peter. I like it. I had some friends who nicknamed me Cardigan before Cardi P was a thing. Anyway, farmers and pubs, that's all we hear about. There's thousands of SMEs in hundreds of different areas that are suffering. In fact, all businesses are suffering, unless you're a big business in cahoots with their so-called leaders. It's taken me 18 years to recover what RBS did to our business, referring, of course, to the financial crash 18 years ago in 2008. Now this from Labour, and many people wondering why all their shortcomings. I'm supporting Reform UK enthusiastically, says JB. There's never a perfect move in the political game board, but there's always a best move. Thank you for that, really interesting. David in Worcestershire says, Alex Burke, like it. Alex Burke talking about how Kemi held Starmer to account. It is only because she gets 6 questions on Wednesdays, while Farage gets a question every 3 months. Congratulating Kemi when she scored a goal, which was actually a gaping own goal by Starmer, says David in Worcestershire. It does beg the question, if Kemi Badenoch can't do what she does and get Starmer on the ropes last Wednesday, well, when can she? Although I did think she had a more forensic approach than I was expecting from her, and that did work well. Every Prime Minister's Questions, of course, it's at 12 o'clock on a Wednesday. I'm in the studio. Julia Hartley-Brewer presents at that stage. I'm in as a guest, and we go through Prime Minister's Questions. So if you can join us at 12 o'clock on a Wednesday, I'd love you to. And just to say a huge thank you to everybody who's making this show and my Saturday show a huge success at the moment. Our numbers are going gangbusters, and the radars, which are the different results, the ratings, came out this week on Thursday, and both the station is doing really well, and particularly my individual shows are doing well, as many other presenter shows are doing really, really well as well. So I just want to thank all the viewers and listeners and everybody who contacts the programme. There'll be people sitting out there as well who've never contacted the programme. Now's the time to do it. Let me know what's on the tip of your tongue, 0344 499 1000. But if you are someone who contacts us or doesn't contact us, however you engage with us, whether you listen for 10 minutes or the whole programme, I want to thank you for that, because you're at the heart of what makes the show a success. One thing I love doing as well, it's a reasonably recent innovation, last couple of years, are voice notes. Loads of people getting in touch with those. Let's go to a few of them. And Adam first.
Hi Peter, this is Adam from Bournemouth. Regarding Keir Starmer, he knew the links that Mandelson had with Jeffrey Epstein, and he knew he was a convicted paedophile, Epstein, and he knew Mandelson knew that. So regardless of whatever happens, he knew, and he still appointed him, and the book stops at the top. So Starmer should go, regardless of who comes in after. Doesn't matter. Starmer has to go because he knew. End of. Cheers, mate. Great show.
And he admitted he knew that Mandelson had continued his contact with Epstein. So, Adam, thank you for that. On that, and on the succession and who should come next, Ed Miliband apparently telling people he wants to be leader of the Labour Party again, despite losing the 2015 election. But Labour loves a loser. They love Kinnock. They love Ed Miliband. There's no option, no good option for the citizens of the UK, says Elisa. Calamity Lamy, OMG. Ed Millipede, OMG. Ange, OMG. Give me strength. And as for who's to blame for the Mandy scandal, Starmer and McSweeney for sure. Let's hear what Sandra has to say.
Hi Peter, it's Sandra from Essex. I don't want Starmer to resign because I'm absolutely terrified of what might follow. What would be good is if he were to call a general election in retaliation to all those ministers currently gunning for him and vying for his position. Thank you.
Interesting one, but I don't think Starmer's going to give up power willingly. Let's speak to Les in Colchester, who has some thoughts on this. You're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Les, what do you think?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for a great show.
Thank you.
It's regarding Starmer's judgment, really. My concern is it's not just the Mandelson issue, but I'm querying his judgment regarding the Chagos Island deal, the Chinese, embassy deal. I think it calls into question him. Basically, I think these deals should all be cancelled until everything is sorted and his
it's his judgment, and we've seen on many different occasions, Les, certainly the examples that you've given, that his judgment isn't right. Maybe he doesn't get politics. That's what I think anyway. I don't think he understands how it's not just about saying, it's not like a legal case. It's not just saying, here's the law, here's the interpretation of the law, here's what should be done. There are lots of different factors in all of this, and if he doesn't get it, he should get out.
Oh, well, absolutely, but what terrifies me is, like most of your people are saying, what do we get in return? I think this is where the public should have the right to demand a general election. We haven't got what I didn't vote Labour, God forbid, but what anybody voted for, we haven't got. We're not going to get it with whoever takes over. This has to be the time that surely the public get a voice.
Yeah. Well, listen, really good points there, Les. Thank you for giving me a ring from Colchester. Mike and Whitney says Alex just repeated all the reasons they got booted out. Alex Burkhardt, who we spoke to earlier on, failure to keep taxes down, failure to leave the ECHR, and then failed to see how Reform will finance their policies by drilling for gas and oil and selling some to the nut job EU. Tories still can't commit to scrapping net zero and having a majority on leaving the ECHR. So lots of criticism of Alex Burkhardt, who we spoke to earlier on. Another person, Liam, says, funny really that Labour have screamed for new Prime Ministers after even the slightest little mistake, but Keir makes the biggest mistake and looks fine. Nothing to see here, folks, and make us look bad and get rid of him. It's the biggest mistake in history. I'm not sure it's the biggest mistake in history, but it's certainly a big mistake. Trevor in Harrow says, good morning, Peter. When will the Tories get it? I'm never ever going back to the abusive relationship where my trust was betrayed on several relationships. I'm looking forward to the Tories to get smashed just as much as I am Labour, and if predictions are right, the whole country feels the same. Suze as well on Alex Burkhardt. Lots of reaction to him. With his tired old script, he sounded totally unbelievable, says Suze. Voted Conservative since 18. Never again. It's reform for me. And Joanna in Salisbury says, hi Cardi P. I question if Conservatives are compromised in some way. Mandelson came back from the US in disgrace, a pariah. He is then having dinner with George Osborne and was photographed peeing in the bushes. That's right. And the police said that they weren't going to take action against him for peeing in public, apparently. I'm concerned at this connection on the other side. Networking, says Joanna. Well, certainly George Osborne and Peter Mandelson have been friends for some time. I wouldn't trust either of them as far as I could throw an elephant. Tony has a voice note. Let's hear that.
Morning, Peter. Great show. It's Tony from Enfield. Ed Miliband may be a favourite amongst the Labour membership, and they may love him, but he's already lost the general election. What makes Ed Miliband think that he would be wanted by the British public the second time round? Does he honestly think and believe in his heart of hearts that come general election time, he'll be standing there like being the champion of the people? I mean, the country absolutely hates him. He's detested, especially on the back end of his net zero policies. It's beyond ridiculous that this man would even put himself forward. Great show, Pete. Take care.
Thanks, Tony. Tony, your point... Sorry, not Tony. What was that voice note person's name? Sorry. That was Tony. Tony, you made a really, really good point there. I don't disagree with a single word of that. What I would add to what you say is that Ed Miliband probably knows in his heart of hearts, unless he's really, really delusional, that he's not going to win the next election if he's leader of the Labour Party. However, he also knows that this is probably the last time for him. This is probably it. So if Starmer goes and there's a leadership election, either he sits back, nothing happens, and he never becomes Prime Minister. But the thing is, you're right that he's detested by a lot of the public, not all the public, but a lot of the public, but he is loved by a lot of Labour members, and they're the people who would choose him. So from his perspective, he'll be thinking, hey, I can be Prime Minister for 3 years. Might not be great, might be very difficult. Labour are going to lose anyway, because they're bad in the polls at the moment. Look, a lot can change in 3 years, of course it can. But from his perspective, realistically, he will say, I have a lot of support within the Labour Party. Lots of people ringing him, telling him, texting him, saying you must run, meeting him in the street and saying, I'm a Labour member, I think you're great. You should run and become leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister. So if everyone's saying that to you, Ed Miliband, that is what will be going through his head. So I don't disagree with a single word you say, Tony, but I think there's another element to it as well. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Let's hear one more voice note before the break, this time from Sean.
Morning, Peter. Sean from Grimsby here. With the politicians still coming out to defend the indefensible and now David Lammy coming out and saying that he told the Prime Minister, yet a couple of weeks before this telling us that Mandelson's a top bloke. It just proves that Westminster is just a hive of villainy and scum, and not one, and I include all of them, cannot be trusted whatsoever at all. Great show, mate.
Sean, thanks for that. I respectfully disagree with you. There are some good politicians. There aren't many of them. There are people with a bit of integrity. I think Carl Turner actually has a bit of integrity. I think everything he said just there was pretty honest, actually. I think he believes it. I disagree with him on a lot of political issues. You know, Joni Reid, I was going on about her, the Labour MP on the Home Affairs Select Committee. She was one of the ones who did a lot of good work to take down Craig Guilford, the head of the West Midlands Police. She cares a lot about anti-Semitism. There are good politicians out there. There aren't many of them. There aren't many who really truly believe stuff and believe stuff that is moral and right. But there are some. And we've got to keep our mind open to it. But Sean, I would also recommend you read a brilliant book, the third best book actually that's been published on politics in the last 5 years, which is Why We Get the Wrong Politicians by Isabel Hardman. Great book, really, really good book. Isabel is a very smart person and the book is a great read. And I think there'll be a lot in that you'd be interested in. Lots more to talk about, including the Home Office being accused of trying to silence an advisor over Islamism. Yes, really. I just wonder how many media outlets are covering this. It's in the Sunday Telegraph today. We're covering it because it's a story. And I want to hear what your thoughts are on it too, of course. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
So there's a fascinating story on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph today. This is an allegation that the Home Office tried to silence an advisor over the issue of Islamism. A former government advisor accusing the Home Office of attempting to silence him after he warned about the threat of Islamism. This is Fayez Mughal, who is the founder of Tell Mama. Well, that's a project that records anti-Muslim incidents in the UK, raising concerns publicly last year that ministers were failing to take seriously the threat of Islamic extremism. Those are really important points. This is a really important debate in our society about the threat of Islamism. At the time, he was working as a contractor for the Home Office's Channel programme, part of the government's counter-extremism strategy. In an article for The Telegraph published last year, he said it was astonishing that during a Home Office summit on extremism, the threat of Islamism, the biggest threat to our society, was not mentioned for the first 90 minutes. Now, he says, the day after the article's publication, he was contacted by a senior Home Office official who wanted to discuss his engagement with the media, as well as the possibility of future government work. We know this happens. We know this happens. Well, Fayez Mughal is with me now. Thank you for joining me. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are indeed.
Excellent. I'm delighted to hear that. Listen, I'm sorry this happened to you. Just talk us through what happened.
Well, I had attended what was called the Prevent and Extremism Sprint Review, and that was held in a private venue over 2 days. That was reviewing the Prevent and Extremism strategy towards, in effect, the general election. It was pretty clear that, to me, Islamist extremism was not front and center in the discussions on that. I then wrote an article in the Telegraph to say, well, where was Islamist extremism? Because this was the area of focus that I was
So
focused
why
on.
do you not think, you know far better than I do, but it is very plain to see that Islamism is a huge threat to our society. We've seen so many attacks, we've seen bombs, we've seen attacks, we've seen people murdered, stabbed with knives, we see what's happening in our prisons. There's so much to this. I mean, and it wasn't mentioned for 90 minutes. I mean, what on earth is going on here?
Precisely. I was one of a handful of people who kind of raised this issue. And I suspect the reason was that civil servants had toned down that element because their assumption was Labour probably was more focused on the social cohesion, lovely, bubbly side of bringing communities together. And they were toning down the extremism and Islamist extremism element. That's what civil servants had probably made the assumption of. That's my belief. And so...
I mean, that is really concerning, that the Home Office, which is the part of government, there's something like 32,000 civil servants in the Home Office. I worked there for a brief period of time, and if they're not taking the number one issue, certainly when it comes to terrorism, seriously, that is of huge concern.
Well, let me just tell you this exactly. The answer is precisely, look, I've worked on tackling anti-Muslim hatred separately to extremism through Telmama. That was a separate piece of work. And then I've gone on to work on Islamist extremism. The fact of the matter is, getting anyone to talk about Islamist extremism today is like, from a ministerial level, is like a bulldog chewing a wasp. They just don't want to talk about it. And so the reality is, if that's what's coming down from the top-down level, it is going to affect civil servants.
And why is it, do you think, Labour are so worried about actually confronting the elephant in the room here?
Because there are two things at play. The first thing is they are politically very weak and they need the support. Their belief is if we talk about Islamism, it might push away sections of Muslim communities, part one. Second element, which is deeply also problematic, is people who are selling, snakeskin, oil snakeskin salespeople are walking into 10 Downing Street saying, oh, social cohesion is the overriding factor today. They are selling what was being sold in the early 2000s. And that message is going through loud and clear in terms of 10 Downing Street. The social cohesion is the overwhelming factor. So let's tone down the issue on Islamist extremism. You even heard it. You heard it in Starmer's speech just a few days ago when he was talking about Peter Mandelson. That speech was about social cohesion. And so the reality is Labour are fixated, as they've been for the last 2 decades, on social cohesion, as if the British public are unable to basically get on with people around them.
Yeah.
They need to be told what social cohesion is. We've got these salespeople walking in, getting grants on social cohesion because there's a vested interest in them, and basically selling the view that that's the overriding factor when I know, that there are people every week going through the Old Bailey who are being convicted of Islamist offences every single week of our lives. And so Islamist extremism continues to be the major problem affecting our country in terms of its security. Yet you have this bubbly social cohesion element that's being driven by Labour because that is the kind of narrative they're trying to sell the public, as if we can't understand that it's wrong to attack people because of they're different. As if we need to be told by Labour.
So tell me about this conversation. What actually happened? What was said to you?
Well, as soon as I wrote the article the next day, I got WhatsApp, I got text messages from a senior Home Office official that I had read as, by the way, that individual had not texted me for 2 years.
Okay.
So after writing the article, I get a text from him. And the suggestion was, well, let's meet and let's talk about what is effectively what is the kind of Islamist extremism thrust. But in a way, the underlying factor to that was, I need to speak to you about what you've written.
Yeah. And did you have that further conversation, or what happened?
No, I then responded back saying, I'm concerned about what you're trying to say. Are you trying to pressurize me? It was an insidious method of trying to pressurize me. I put that in the text. And the answer was no, but I think it'd be really important we meet because going forward about work, again, a very insidious message. having not heard from these people for 2 years.
Yeah, suddenly they're actually taking notice. I should say a Home Office spokesman said the government regularly works with external partners and experts to discuss policy ideas as broad consultation in an important part of responsible policy development. The UK has one of the most robust counter-terrorism frameworks in the world, with the powers needed for the security services and police to keep it safe. If they had said to you, as they should have said at the start of that meeting, we are going to talk about Islamist extremism because that is the #1 problem when it comes to the security of this nation. For the next 90 minutes, Fayez Mughal is going to talk to us. We don't have 90 minutes now, but what would you have actually said? What would your pitch to them be?
My pitch to them would have been very clear. Islamist extremism continues to be the major overriding threat to us all. There are different forms of Islamist extremism, and here they are. This is how the narrative is spreading through our communities. This is how people are being affected. And in effect, these are the international and national triggers that are taking place. I would then add a caveat, but there are other forms of extremism. We need to reflect on them, but they are not the overriding factor. That would have been my presentation. Instead, what I got was there's lots of mixed ideology. There's lots of misogyny-based extremism and Islamist extremism. It was tagged on to the end.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it was sold.
And you have been, well, you were the founder of Tell Mama, project recording anti-Muslim incidents in the UK. You really care about ordinary Muslims being targeted. I just wonder, and what we often don't see, and we're seeing it right now from you, and I commend you for it, we're talking about the differences between people who are just ordinary, straightforward Muslims, many of them very patriotic people who are contributing to this country, and Islamism. A lot of people, including, and I'm not criticising them for this at all, but a lot of our viewers and listeners don't see that distinction at all and criticise me for even talking about that distinction. That's fine because, you know, we have free speech on this station. People talk about what they want to talk about. Within that, as someone who has worked to combat anti-Muslim hatred, I wonder how you would respond to that kind of suggestion that actually Islamists are clearly inspired by some element of Islam. Are there people providing a sea for them to swim in? Just tackle that head on right now, Fayez, if you would.
Yeah, look, first of all, you're absolutely right. I'm Muslim myself. I don't want to see a single British Muslim person attacked because of their identity. I spent many years personally being attacked by the far right because of my work tackling anti-Muslim hatred. It is unacceptable in our society. That is a red line. Now, if we look at Islamism, which is a political form of Islam, which is autocratic, non-democratic, and attempts to put religion right into the heart of policy making, that form of Islamism is distinctly different to what 95% of what British Muslims want. I want to then add a caveat there. There is Islamism that has spread. It has spread over the last 40 years into our country, starting off from the beginning of the Salman Rushdie affair and then going on from that. And that Islamism has gotten worse, particularly and acutely over Gaza in the last 2 years. And we have a problem of that form of autocratic, idealistic, non-democratic, and I would say deeply brittle form of interpretation of Islam that needs to be challenged. That is what I'm asking to be challenged.
And there are more than 5% of Muslims in this country who are somewhere in the middle, are they not? Where they may be perfectly law-abiding, but they are, I mean, the statistics bear this out, that there is a lot of hostility to Israel, there's a lot of anti-Semitism, there's a lot of skepticism about the institutions of this country. There are a lot of people who may not necessarily support Islamism, but they're somewhere in the middle. And you're speaking out, you've spoken out for a long time, and I commend you for doing so today. Often what we don't get are the imams coming on the airwaves saying, this Islamist attack has happened, these protests where people are having, placards celebrating Hamas, celebrating Hezbollah, for example, that's unacceptable. We often don't get that from moderate Muslims. Can you just tell us your thoughts around that?
Absolutely. Look, there is let's look at this like a solar eclipse. There is the umbra, the deep part of extremism where people are steeped in it, or in Islamist extremism ideology. Then there is the penumbra, people who are in the outer regions, a wider number of people who may not be wholly steeped in the ideology, but they certainly will be receptive to elements of the narrative. You're absolutely right. That's happening, and we need to be careful, and that's why we need to challenge it. And there's not enough people challenging it.
Is Labour scared of that? You talk about that penumbra, those people in the middle.
Absolutely.
Okay, are other political parties scared about it as well? Or are we as a society scared of offending people who say things, who think things, who may not act in a way, they're not setting bombs off or whatever, but they may, as you say, they're somewhere in the middle. There seems to me to be a real fear of that. Oh, we can't upset those people. Oh, those people, for example, who might say Hamas are justified, for example, we can't upset them.
Totally. Look, Labour and the Green Party are effectively not going to touch challenging those people. Okay, let's just be honest. Labour and the Green Party are in that space right now. But let me also add on to this. You mentioned imams. Now, yes, there have been imams some imams have been speaking in mosques over Gaza that have been speaking and exporting extremist rhetoric. The reality is even those imams who want to speak will probably get sacked from their jobs, will probably be intimidated in their own community. So we have a problem of Islamist extremism.
And there are people, non-Islamist Muslims, not challenging, reporting extremist activity and radicalisation as well taking place. They're sitting quietly and letting it happen. Some of them are content to let that grow. How do we tackle that problem?
Well, we tackle that problem by, in effect, challenge. So we need local, we need national challenge to what's happening there. We need good community information. Look, one of the weaknesses of the Home Office is where is the challenge coming from the Home Office? Where is there's lots of grant money being given to providers to go and do this challenge.
It's got to come from within that community as well, though, doesn't it?
It's got to come from the community within, but also it needs to come from those project providers who are being paid by the public purse to do this work. Where are they? They're not speaking up. Why is the Home Office not pushing them to speak up? And those people are working in the community. So again, it goes back to the Home Office is taking a passive approach rather than a proactive approach. And these people will not, as I said, ministers, it's like a bulldog chewing a wasp. They won't speak about Islamist extremism.
Listen, thank you for speaking to us today. That is Fiyaz Mughal, who is the founder of Tell Mama project that records anti-Muslim incidents in the UK. What do you think of what he said? Let us know. 0344 499 1000. There are loads of ways to get in touch. Earlier, of course, the main issue has been dominating the weekend, and I imagine will dominate this week, is, of course, the story about Peter Mandelson. We spoke to Carl Turner, the Labour MP, a little bit earlier on this hour. He had some very interesting things to say about texting Keir Starmer his thoughts that he should dump Morgan McSweeney. This is what Carl Turner told us earlier.
The Prime Minister was entitled to take from what David Lammy was saying with a big pinch of salt, really. I mean, this is the guy, David, who used to defend the right to jury trial until he didn't. I mean, honestly, these people need to button it now, really. They criticise me for coming out and speaking. I've got the PM's best interests at heart. I'm texting him at 6 o'clock this morning, the PM. You know, he knows where
Did he text back, Carl?
He didn't, to be fair, Peter, but the stuff I was saying was fairly contentious. I don't expect the Prime Minister to get into a conversation with me.
What were you telling him this morning?
I was saying, look, you've got a chance to survive here, but you've got to get him out the door.
What do you think about what Carl Turner said? What do you think about what Fiyaz Mughal said a few minutes ago as well? Whatever's on the tip of your tongue, let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. More of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes next here on Talk.
So there's some people in society who believe that, the flag is the symbol of the country, we should be proud of it, we should wave it, and, I'm one of those. People who are apologists for the British Empire, for apologists for how we've been in the past, and it's almost a symbol of national shame to them. It's kind of like, well, we flew that flag. Oh, I'm not sure about this one.
The whole national shame thing, I believe that actually that's a sort of a greater agenda going on, to be honest with you. It's apologist nature of of so many successive governments now who have sort of almost been forced to be embarrassed by our great British history.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mary in Hemel Hempstead has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000 about Starmer and Lammy. Mary, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, if these two are supposed to both be lawyers, I can only assume that the standard anybody can be a lawyer, because they don't seem to have a brain cell between them.
David Lammy went to Cambridge and is a barrister. So yeah, anytime you hear someone went to Cambridge and is a barrister, just remember David Lammy did both those things.
Yeah, I know. So therefore, I can only assume, well, they say standards have dropped in the universities, and he's one of the reasons that turned out.
And he was there, 30 years ago, so yeah.
I mean, I just can't believe their incompetence is so great that it just beggars belief. I mean, I can understand why. Was, what's his name, Lammy, was he a prosecution lawyer or what sort of lawyer?
I don't know what kind of barrister he was. What should happen now, Mary, do you think?
Well, in regards to well, really, we all know that we should really have a general election, but they won't give us that. So.
Well, exactly. Do you think Starmer should go, Mary?
Well, it's what follows on, that's the problem.
Yeah.
He's the weak link, but...
Prime Minister Miliband?
No. I can remember, though, what's her name?
Or Rayner, yeah.
Rayner, saying in Parliament when Boris was going, when it was all about Boris, he should call a general election now.
Yeah, well, we heard a lot of that, didn't we? Yeah, absolutely.
We don't hear that now from Angela Rayner, are we, about this lot?
She's suddenly been a bit quiet on all of that. Mary, listen, thanks for your thoughts. I really appreciate them. Another Mary has been in touch from County Down. She says if there were really 95% of Muslims who reject extremism, we wouldn't have a problem with it, says Mary in County Down. Lots of thoughts on that. We're going to talk to someone on the phone about that a little bit later on. A little bit more on Mandelson now, because I want to hear another voice note. This from someone calling themselves Sparks. I'm not sure that's a real name, but that's okay. This is what Sparks has to say.
Well, I mean, I just have to say that I had no idea how dark it would get what had happened with Mandy, even though, of course, his name is the Prince of Darkness. There was no clue, and as a former prosecutor, I might have known better. Sparks, Derbyshire.
Thank you. Karen has a voice note as well on the payoff.
Hi, Peter. This Mandelson payoff,
yes, he should give it back because it's actually our money, our taxpayers' money. How dare the government give him a golden handshake? If I got fired for my job, I wouldn't get a five-figure payout. I'd get booted out the door, rightly so. It's disgusting. It's our money, not the government's, our money. We pay it in. They shouldn't be paying it out to people like Mandelson. Scandal after scandal. This man has got very rich on the back of politics of this country. He's an absolute disgrace. He should have gone years ago. No wonder they called him the Prince of Darkness, because he kept rising every time they put him down dead. Oh my God. I mean, we thought he was dead in the water years ago, but obviously not. Certainly is the Prince of Darkness, and I bet you he rises again to suck some more blood out of somebody else.
Karen, thank you. I think the chances of Peter Mandelson coming back are very low, but your comments are very, very well made, and thank you for them. Certainly with that £55,000, up to £55,000, could be between 38,000 and 55. His payoff when he got the Spanish archer elbow from his job, well, actually got all that money. What should happen to it now? Should he pay it back? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Lots as well coming in on the interview I did with Fayaz Mughal earlier. Benny in Belfast saying, unless the Home Office and Muslim community leaders, as well as people like your guest, are prepared to outline and address the obvious issue, Islamism will continue to grow in this country and we will all suffer the consequences. Margaret in Birmingham says, great interview with Carl Turner earlier on. He talks common sense and never comes out with waffle and rubbish. Well done, Carl. Can we have him in number 10, please, says Margaret in Birmingham. And Graham says, let's not forget the mastermind genius Calamity Lammy is a barrister. So what questions did he ask about Mandelson before he was made the ambassador, says Graham in Bushy. Yeah, if he has that prosecutorial training and stance, what did he ask about Mandelson, especially when he was apparently saying to Keir Starmer that he didn't want Mandelson to become the US ambassador. Jason in the Lake District says, just out of curiosity, if Isabel Hardman's book that you recommended earlier on is the third best political book of the last 5 years, what are the second and first? I mean, I couldn't possibly answer that question, but I'd say probably in number 2, The Secret Life of Special Advisors by Peter Cardwell, and number 1, Political Animals by Peter Cardwell. And Ofcom, if you're watching, we know that if you're asking me that question and I was answering it, so it's editorially justified. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Lots more to discuss, including about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. We're going to talk about him in just a few minutes' time. We're also going to talk about the Great British Pub, whether Nigel Farage can actually rescue them. Do Labour even understand them? Let us know your thoughts on all of that. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 12 o'clock. Very good afternoon to you. I'm Peter Cardwell here on Talk for the next hour. Loads to discuss. Peter Mandelson's future is probably assured. I would imagine there'll be charges after what he has done. We'll see. The police investigation continues. But what about Keir Starmer? Will he survive the week? Will his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney? That's the big issue that people want to talk about today. Lots of people getting in touch about Islamism as well. Just done an interview a few minutes ago about that. We spoke about lots of issues to the Shadow Cabinet Minister, Alex Burkhardt, and also spoke to the backbencher, Karl Turner, about what he said about Morgan McSweeney needing to go. We'll talk about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in a second. More revelations, this time in the Mail. Epstein took a very cute, in inverted commas, young Romanian model to a private dinner at Buckingham Palace for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. We'll get the latest on all of that. We'll also talk about pubs, because Rory Hanrahan, pub landlord who's spoken to us previously, written a couple of articles actually referring to what Nigel Farage has said about the Great British Pub. Do the numbers add up, and actually would this save the Great British Pub? Because there's so many of our viewers and listeners who love the pub. I'm one of them. I don't even drink it. I love the pub, and there's so many different issues in all of this because so many of them are closing. 8 a week are closing. We'll talk about all of this. We'll reflect as well on what Pat McFadden has been saying. The Welfare Secretary has been talking all about the Mandelson affair, and we'll get your views too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. We'll play out a load of those between now and 1 o'clock. Keep them to less than a minute, and that means they are more likely to be played. 0344 499 1000. You can ring me on that number too, and you can send me a WhatsApp text message. Lots of ways to get in touch, lots of things to talk about here on Talk. Why didn't you ask Karl Turner, says Dean Chester, when he is going to stand down and call a by-election in opposition to Lammy's jury stance, as he himself declared he would do in December or thereabouts? Tracy says the Mandelson connection to the Prime Minister is on the front page of every paper, however sleazy Starmer will survive it. However, one thing no one is discussing that asks a lot of questions regarding the whole Labour Party, not just the Prime Minister, is the independent inquiry that is currently being run by Rupert Lowe regarding the rape gangs, which is still the main story, in my opinion, says Tracy. And yes, we cover that quite a lot. I've spoken to Rupert Lowe about that, certainly. Also, Frank in Cheltenham has been in touch about the founder of Tal Mama, the project that records anti-Muslim incidents in the UK, Fayez Mughal, who I've spoken to a little bit earlier on. Frank says, you and your guest keep using the term Islamist. What you really mean, and what you should say instead, is extremist Muslim. The former term is wriggling, a concocted way of not talking about Muslims. The latter is accurate and far more descriptively factual. Maybe you're following laid down rules, in which case fair enough, you've no choice. But if there are no such rules, then you've no excuse and should amend your comments accordingly. Frank, I'm not told what to say. I can describe it however I want. Islamism, I think, is a widely accepted phrase for extremist Muslims. So I think the two are probably interchangeable, but it's a fair point, and I'll go away and have a think about that as well. Rachel says, I thought Fayez was erudite and informative. We need to hear balanced analysis of the issue of Islamification and for us to make true critical judgment about the enormity of the issue. How I do fear his statistical evidence may be underestimated. Well, I challenge him on that, Rachel, because I do believe it's far more than 5%. I also think that there are many more people in that penumbra as well. And we see that. There have been statistical analysis has been done, surveys have been done of many Muslims in this country, about half of whom openly say that they're anti-Semitic, for example, and that's something that I care about a lot. Paul in Luton says we need more of Mr Mughal speaking out. A great guest, says Paul, so thank you for that. Certainly we do have some great guests on this station. And another one is coming up, and that is Caroline Aston, the royal commentator, because there is a story in the Mail today, more revelations about Epstein taking a quote-unquote very cute young Romanian model to a private dinner at Buckingham Palace for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. This is bombshell emails disclosing how Andrew entertained Epstein and 4 women, including the model from Bucharest and another from Russia, at the palace while Queen Elizabeth was away at Balmoral. described the Romanian woman who's in her 20s as very cute and told her she'd been perfect. I mean, this just makes my skin crawl. He says Andrew thought she was beautiful, adding, no man looks at your clothes. Well, I'm not going to read all that out. I mean, that is just absolutely horrendous. Unclear whether the young Romanian woman was one of Epstein's many sex abuse victims, but the latest revelation fueling calls for the Metropolitan Police to launch a criminal investigation into Andrew. Caroline Aston is a royal commentator who's with me now. Caroline, your thoughts on this?
Well, this great sleazy snowball of scandal continues to roll, doesn't it? Gaining more allegations of fumblings and fornication by the day, with a dose of afternoon tea at the palace apparently dropped into it. Where's it going to end? And this has been a dramatic week, hasn't it, with the deposed ex-prince spirited away under cover of darkness to his interim new home at Wood Farm at Sandringham. And the reason for that, basically, is the terrible optics of the Andrews situation. There you are, riding around as though he hasn't got a care in the world on a horse at Windsor. And quite frankly, I think the King and the Prince of Wales had just about enough of these very public displays, which are classic of this narcissistic, arrogant man who really doesn't get it, continues to vehemently deny any wrongdoing, and can't get his head around what's happened to him. And you know, at the root of all of this is the fact that he is what I call a member of an old style of being royal. Someone who thinks the accident of birth, who made him what he was, is enough. Look no further. Respect me because of who my mother was, rather than what I do with my life. Plus which, of course, Peter, not enough money to have the lifestyle that he thought he should have as a prince of the blood royal, which led him into some, shall we say, dark corners. What should
he do? Speaking of those dark corners, what should he do now? We've seen actually the Clintons, Bill and Hillary Clinton, have done a U-turn. They say they're going to give evidence to the congressional hearings on Jeffrey Epstein. We know that Prince Andrew says, he keeps saying, I'm available, I'll talk to whoever wants to talk to me, but it never quite seems to happen. Prince Andrew's been stripped of his titles, his home has been taken away, all the rest of it. I have absolutely no sympathy for him in any of that. But what should he do now? What more can he do to give clarity about his role, what he knew when? Peter Mandelson will have to do that. Andrew should too.
Well, I think Prince Edward, who spoke recently while in Dubai, had it in one. It's a matter of personal choice and conscience. Well, the personal choice of Andrew at the moment appears to be not to say anything at all. Conscience? Well, it's debatable. How much of that vital quality does the man actually have? Pricking him, pushing him on to do something. I think he's determined to brazen this out for the time being, to watch what goes on. But if I was him, I'd keep my head well below the public parapet, shut up, put up, wait to see what happens, and then, if you can dig deep into the darker corners of your own soul, perhaps realise that it's about time you did do something like this, put an end to some of the press coverage, and perhaps, just perhaps, expressed sympathy for the victims, the survivors of the Epstein years.
Which is exactly what I should have done in answer to the very first question that Emily Maitlis asked him in that 2019 interview. The first thing he should have said was, Emily, we've got an hour, I'm going to answer all your questions as honestly as I can. But before I do that, what I want to do is say I made a catastrophic error of judgment in ever trusting Jeffrey Epstein and continuing to associate with him, and my heart goes out to those victims, to their families, and I will do absolutely anything I can to help them get justice. That is exactly what he should have said. He said none of that. Not a thing. Let's talk about other royals, because Princess Anne was cheered at the rugby yesterday. We know as well that King Charles has been heckled because of Andrew. This is the second time I think I remember it happening anyway in the last few months. What does he do now, do you think?
I think he's done all he himself can do for the moment. He very quickly stepped in and sent his brother, as I say, off to the frozen wastes of Sandringham. Incidentally, it's only a 20-minute drive from there to the nearest Pizza Express for Andrew, so that could be really quite interesting.
I love how you know that, Caroline. That's the value-added Caroline Aston commentary that you get on this station.
So absolutely wonderful. And so, yes, talking about Emily Maitlis, of course, I mean, what a saga, that juggernaut of a crash of an interview was, wasn't it? With all the protestations, the saga of pizza and perspiration that was basically at the root of that. I think the thing here is the king needs to watch how this goes on a day-to-day basis. But at the end of the day, he can't force his brother to testify. He can't. He's done all he can to cancel him, to nullify him, to neutralise him. And you know, the rotten apple has been removed as far as possible from the royal barrel. And the problem is, all the good stuff that the royals do, or supposed to do, that's part of their remit, that's going on.
Yeah.
But no one's noticing that, are they? Because it's all obscured by the ongoing, unfolding, not very uplifting Andrew saga. That's the problem for the king. To
Yes.
carry the institution forward, to let the world see that they're still out there functioning. And I will just say this, thank God the late Queen Elizabeth II isn't alive to see this after those years.
Well, exactly. Caroline,
Yeah.
listen, thank you for that analysis. Caroline Allison, royal commentator. I've actually written down the saga of pizza and perspiration. My goodness, it's a lot more than that, of course, but Caroline has quite the turn of phrase, let me tell you. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Lots of people on Islamism as well. Paul says, modern Muslims, which side will they take if Islamists try to take over the Christian state or their religion? Another person, Michael, saying social cohesion has backfired massively. The cover-ups of the grooming gangs are the perfect example. Keep criminal activity being covered up year on year. It will eventually explode and become public. Who will be outraged? The authorities need to adopt a tried and tested method of nipping it in the bud. Well, thank you for all of that. Jackie in Oldham has been in touch too on Islamism. Jackie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I think your interview with Fayaz was really refreshing. I think specifically the point that he made about Islamism and people who are moderate, that are not Islamists, but have views that are probably concerning about Jewish people. We know from the Henry Jackson survey, there were shocking results that came out from that. You know, where only 24% of the Muslims surveyed, you know, believed that October the 7th actually happened.
Yeah.
So
there's some really, I know exactly what you're talking about, that very, very good survey. Levels of anti-Semitism within the Muslim community, levels of rejection of British institutions. This is not the 5% that Fayaz was talking about. There's a lot more to this. There may not be people setting off bombs and openly supporting Hamas, although there are plenty of them. But there's a lot of people who hold these opinions, and their lives will be affected by that. And we need to tackle that.
Yeah, and I think we've facilitated it. Well, politicians have facilitated it in a lot of ways, because we've allowed parallel societies, and where moderate Muslims, you know, because of the social pressures and norms within that community, can't challenge radical views. You know, they're not free to come out and say what they want to say. And we've allowed them societies. Now, in Denmark, they don't allow parallel societies. If a society gets too big, people are integrated so that you don't end up with echo chambers.
Well, and that's exactly right. Multiculturalism has failed. We need to be integrated. We need to have shared British values. And if you don't have those shared British values, I don't want you in this country.
Yeah, and I think also, if you look at the civil service have a Muslim network which they set up inside of it, which promotes Muslims in, you know, within the civil service.
Yeah, lots of different organisations have those kind of organisations, yeah.
But why specifically is it for Muslims? There's lots of different.
There may well be others within the Home Office. I know there are lots of different companies, there are lots of different organisations that have those, but I know what you mean, and certainly what we've seen within, from memory, it was the Cabinet Office one. There was one of those, and there were some very, very extreme views that were expressed. That's not to say everybody in those groups believes that, but there were, you know, some seminars, lectures, and things that were going down a road that was anti-British. And I do think we need to monitor all of that and be very, very clear about it. You're right, though. There are loads of people who should be speaking out about this. It's not just a top-down thing, Jackie, is it? It's not just the Home Office saying, right, well, be socially coherent and cohesive. It's actually people in mosques, in communities saying, listen, I think there might be a bit of radicalisation here. I think there are people, I was at the mosque on the Friday, and the Imam said some stuff I'm actually quite worried about. Can you please look into that? There are some people, of course, who do say those things, but there need to be more. We need people to stand up against this from the Muslim community.
Yeah, we do. But if you have a parallel society that basically functions itself outside of, British towns and British society, then you've created an echo chamber. You've created a cohesive society where social norms mean that you cannot speak out, and until you tackle that face on and ban community leaders. Why have we got community leaders instead of speaking to people? We don't have community leaders, for British people.
And also the question is, are those self-appointed? Are they actually people who do speak for the majority of the community? Are those people who are saying things that they want to say, or are they leading, or are they representing, or a bit of both? It's a really, really interesting points. And actually, we've had a fantastic suggestion, Jackie. I wonder what you think about this. So obviously, my background is Northern Ireland. I'm from there, and I know that there were loads of people in the Republican and Loyalist communities who they were the ones who they wouldn't have set the bombs off and shot people themselves, but they kind of allowed it to exist. There were the people who held those opinions, who condoned it, who didn't say what should be done. We've had a really, really good idea from a listener who sent in and said, why don't we get someone who has expertise in Northern Ireland on, maybe with someone like Momus, who spoke to us a couple of weeks ago, I think it was last week, or maybe someone like our guest earlier on, Fayaz, and talk about this, actually confront this head on, and talk about the fact that it's not just the people doing this stuff, it's the people often in the communities who allow it to happen. I think that would be interesting, Jackie. What do you think?
Yeah, I do agree that there needs to be, within these parallel communities, there needs to be sort of an education approach,
and just a bit of bravery as well, just a bit of standing up and saying this is wrong. I know it can be difficult and people can become targets, but there's a lot of stuff you can do behind the scenes as well. Jackie, a lot of common sense as usual. Thank you, Jackie and Oldham, much appreciate that. A couple of voice notes before the break. Let's hear the first one from Diane. This is on Keir Starmer. This is what Diane thinks.
Hi Peter. I think Starmer can stay for 18 months on the proviso he makes no deals, for example, EU, Chagos, or any other country, unless it's to deport migrants. And finally, at the end of the 18 months, we have a general election. Any runners for the role should be deeply investigated, in particular the net zero nutter. And if they were to bring one in, there should be a general election in 6 months. Thanks, Diane, Coventry.
Thanks, Diane. Appreciate you sending that message from Coventry, and a lot of common sense in it. Glenn now?
Morning, Peter. Glenn from Suffolk here. Listening to Alex Burghardt waxing lyrical about Kemi Badenoch. She took so long to get going in Prime Minister's question time. It was lamentable. And the only reason she does so well now is because he is so bad. If he was half decent, she would be struggling like she did at the start. And just something that people continually forget about, she keeps banging on about leaving the ECHR. All the libertarians and the liberals in her party won't let that happen. Have a good day.
Thank you, Glenn. I think those are very fair and reasonable and intelligent points, especially about the ECHR. But also, she can kind of say what she wants, because I don't think Kemi Badenoch is going to be the next Prime Minister of our country. Maybe it'll be Nigel Farage. Maybe it'll be Ed Miliband. Lots to discuss on all of this. More of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes next here on Talk.
So there's some people in society who believe that, you know, the flag is the symbol of the country, we should be proud of it, we should wave it, and, you know, I'm one of those. People who are apologists for the British Empire, for apologists for how we've been in the past, and it's almost a symbol of national shame to them. It's kind of like, well, we flew that flag. Oh, I'm not sure about this one.
The whole national shame thing, I believe that actually that's a sort of a greater agenda going on, to be honest with you. It's apologist nature of of so many successive governments now who have sort of almost been forced to be embarrassed by our great British history.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A little bit of breaking news now on Talk, and I'm sure you've been absolutely gripped by the Japanese election. But the Japanese ultra-conservative Prime Minister is set to seize more power after an exit poll had her securing a big majority in the country's lower house. Sane Tachiki's coalition is expected to win between 302 and 366 of the 465 seats in the chamber, according to the national broadcaster's predictions, NHK. That is well above the 233 needed for a majority. So listen, I don't think, you know, Japan's election is going to have a huge effect on our day-to-day lives, but it is interesting to see that the right is doing well in Japan, and of course that has implications to some degree for the world, certainly for Japan, and interesting to see that. Speaking of implications in this country, it'll be very interesting to see what happens this week. A fascinating interview earlier on with Carl Turner MP. He was telling me about texting the Prime Minister saying he should get rid of Morgan McSweeney, his Chief of Staff. This is just a little flavour of what Carl told me a little bit earlier on today.
The Prime Minister was entitled to take from what David Lammy was saying with a big pinch of salt, really. I mean, this is the guy, David, who used to defend the right to jury trial until he didn't. I mean, honestly, these people need to button it now, really. They criticise me for coming out and speaking. I've got the PM's best interests at heart. I'm texting him at 6 o'clock this morning, the PM. You know, he knows where...
Did he text back, Carl?
He didn't, to be fair, Peter, but the stuff I was saying was fairly contentious. I don't expect the Prime Minister to get into a conversation with me.
What were you telling him this morning?
I was saying, look, you've got a chance to survive here, but you've got to get him out the door.
The next thing. Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch on all of these different issues. We'll come to a couple of voice notes in a second, but I just want to bring you a little bit of what Alex Burghardt, the Shadow Cabinet Minister, said about Mandelson and about Starmer being fully briefed.
He had been briefed officially that Mandelson had maintained his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein's conviction for paedophilia, and that he carried on taking Epstein's hospitality. The fact that Mandelson had been fired twice, that was raised with him as a big red flag, but also Mandelson's business dealings, which his big company, Global Counsel, that he set up, we now know with Jeffrey Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's help, that Global Counsel had these business dealings in Russia and in China that the government, that Whitehall was very concerned by too. There's no way that the Prime Minister should have appointed Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to Washington, given the official briefing that he'd been given. But he went ahead and did it anyway. I don't think we can trust his judgment ever again, and I think the Labour Party is waking up to the fact that it can't trust his judgment ever again.
Is it his judgment, or is it Morgan McSweeney's judgment, and should Morgan McSweeney go?
And Morgan McSweeney, who is Peter Mandelson's protege, very obviously gave the Prime Minister bad advice. But ultimately, responsibility rests with the Prime Minister. It's politicians who have to decide these things, and he saw the evidence and he made the wrong call. And so it's on him.
Shadow Cabinet Minister Alex Burghardt there. Let's play a couple of voice notes. David first.
Hi Peter, great show as usual. What I don't get is these politicians, they don't have any talent, they don't have any business acumen. All they have is access to each other and to policy. So what's going on with Epstein is just access. What on earth is going on in that Gothic palace with all the other politicians? Who are they working for? David in the Cotswolds.
Thank you, David. I think a lot of people are asking those questions and will continue to. Let's hear what Kelvin says.
Good morning, Peter. Happy Sunday, if you can say that. Alex Burghardt, what a joke. He's slating reform again. That's all they ever do. Labour are exactly the same. They come on and first thing they do is slate the Reform Party. The other night on Question Time, First Chancellor, this Green woman, I can't remember her name, she was asked a question. It was nothing to do with the reform, but as soon as she started to open her mouth, she started slating reform. They're that frightened of the Reform Party and Nigel Farage. And the Tories, they're just bricking it now because they know now they've had their time. Their time's been and gone, and it's time for something new. And regarding all the people that have gone over from the Tories to the Reform Party, well, why did they move? Because they all tried to do things and bring stuff in, like stopping the boats and all that lot, and they got stopped. So Suella Braverman was one. She got stopped. Every time she brought some idea in to stop the boats, she was stopped. That, I'd leave her for, getting frustrated like that. It's just ridiculous. They're just trying to get back in. Bye.
Kelvin, thanks very much for your points there. And interestingly, on reform, they came out with a big policy this week about pubs and what to do about pubs. And of course, there's a lot of the hospitality industry that has taken a real hammering over the last 5 years. We're going to talk to a pub landlord in a second. He's written a couple of articles, actually, for different publications in the last week, as well as running 3 pubs. He's a busy boy, is old Rory. Why the Labour Party loathe the pub, and can Nigel Farage save the great British pub? We'll get answers to both those points next from Rory Hanrahan, who runs 3 pubs in Oxfordshire. He's coming up, and I want to hear your comments too, of course. 0344 499 1000. Plenty of time between now and 1 o'clock to get your voice on the air. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It was also interesting what Alex Burkhardt was saying there a little bit earlier on in the programme. He's the Shadow Cabinet Minister, and he was talking about Nigel Farage, what Nigel Farage is offering. And yeah, the Tories are attacking reform, as Kelvin said in his voice note there before the break, absolutely, because they're worried about reform. Reform are 10 points ahead of them in quite a lot of polls, between 6 and 10, depending on which polls you look at. Certainly the local elections are going to be a time when we see that Reform UK do really, really well, if the polls are to be believed. It'll be fascinating to see what happens in Gorton and Denton in that by-election, which is happening in, I think it's Thursday, 2 weeks actually. It's the 26th, so yeah, that'll be Thursday, 2 weeks. I just want to play one more clip actually of what Alex Burkhardt said, talking about Reform UK offering, as he put it, the moon on a stick.
Nigel Farage is trying to sell the country the moon on a stick, but his sums don't add up. He had an announcement last week, simple announcement, which had a £10 billion black hole. That's something that Mel Stride pointed out, by the way. £10 billion black hole in it. Every time they come up forward, it turns out that it falls apart at the first available moment. Yeah, that happened in general election. They made a whole bunch of problems in the general election. They've now retracted them because they didn't add up. It just, you look, fundamentally, in the next election, the country is going to have to decide whether it wants more Labour, which I don't think it will, or it's going to have to decide whether it wants a party of Reform are good campaigners, but economic policy doesn't add up, or a Conservative party that is absolutely determined to reduce government spending, get the debt under control, cut people's taxes, get growth, and put a bit of fire in the belly of the country again. And I have every confidence that Kemi and the party are going to be able to do that over the course of the next 3 years.
Well, I want to talk about one of the big policies that Nigel Farage put out this week. He talked about rescuing pubs. Now, there's so many parts of the hospitality sector that have suffered, particularly in the last 5 years, but many of them talking about, of course, national insurance rises and lots of other issues. Can Nigel Farage save the Great British Pub? That is the question asked in an article in The Spectator by Rory Hanrahan. Now, Rory is a landlord of 3 pubs. He's a writer as well, of course, and joins me now. Rory, let me simply ask you that question. Can Nigel Farage save the Great British Pub?
Well, morning, Peter. How are you?
Hiya.
I think what I would say is Reform's policies are certainly the most fleshed out and most positive pub hospitality policy proposals we've seen so far. You know, they're the first ones to come stick their head over the parapet, come up with genuinely quite serious structural reforms around business rates, around national insurance, around minimum wage, around keeping the drink driving limit where it is. So I would describe their policy so far as a B or B plus, with Labour sitting somewhere around an F minus currently.
You've written another article for Spiked Online saying why the Labour Party loathes the pub. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think you've got to go right back to the start of the Labour Party movement and the cooperative movement. The Keir Hardys of the world, these guys, they were Methodists, they were teetotalers. They wanted to better the white English and Welsh working class. They wanted to improve them. And the inheritors of that new sort of Labour movement under Blair in Islington and North London, the middle classes, they don't really like drunk, white, young men who like to shout and they like to drink.
Do you think in the middle maybe Labour did? They had lots of working men's clubs. They talked about beer and sandwiches. The union leaders not exactly known for having a cup of tea and a slice of cake.
Well, I think exactly that. There was a sort of a middle ground. I mean, I think the last nationalised pub was closed in Wales in something like 1970 something that had been nationalised during the war. And it had picture halls, it had lecture halls, it had live drawing classes for minors, it had French classes and German classes. There was something really quite deep going on. So they moved out of the sort of puritanical Methodist stuff, slightly before we move into the new Puritanism of New Labour. We're all going to live forever if we eat muesli and do yoga. Sadly, no one gets out alive, no matter how much yoga they do.
Well, exactly.
No matter how much muesli you eat. So you might as well enjoy a little bit of the in-between, So there was that period of time where Labour actually was blue dog Labour. It represented actual white working class British, English, Welsh, Scottish people, you know, the working man's clubs, the entertainment, families down on a Sunday afternoon, a degree of community and cohesion. But somewhere along the line, as Labour moved into that late 90s period and it rebranded itself as Cool Britannia, there was nothing cool about whippets and pints of bitter anymore, you know?
But I mean, it's not just Labour that have changed the nature of the pub. There have been so many other factors. For you running 3 pubs today, they must have changed a lot even in the time that you've been running them.
So when I started working in pubs first, sort of part-time around something else I used to do in the late 90s and then again in the mid-2000s, and they've completely changed, you know. Culture has changed, attitude to alcohol has changed, our attitude to diet has changed, our attitude to drink driving has changed. Smoking is no longer something that people, you know, sort of indulge in or want around them in anywhere near the same model. But an awful lot of the changes are not natural changes. So there will be a lot more people in the pub if the government was to step out of the way and remove a lot of the restrictions it's placed and extra costs. So, for example, the Welsh First Minister, not someone who I would be inclined to agree with very often, turned around and said it's not government's place to get people to go out. And she's right. It's also not government's place to stop them going out.
Okay.
And the removal of government, the removal of, I mean, when you look at, you know, we make probably between 5 and 14 pence on a pint in a Thai pub. Now, that should be more like 85 or 90 pence in a pub, which means a pint would be £5 on average instead of heading towards £6 and £7.
Yeah.
Which would then become affordable. And wages have stayed pretty much the same for the last 25 years, but everything else has become dearer for ordinary people.
Let me just exactly on that point. Nick in Loughborough has been in touch and says, please ask your upcoming pub commentator why nobody ever mentions the outrageous, pernicious tide prices charged to tenants by pub companies who own the premises, often representing an uplift of £60 per cask or keg above free trade prices. But put in perspective, if a publican sells 20 kegs per week, that equates to an extra £60,000 per annum on top of an already high rent. Does that add up in your mind?
It does. He's absolutely right. I mean, part of the problem was when Thatcher, for very good reasons, broke up what was called the beer orders, and you had a monopoly of the main breweries. This then created an option for what was called the pub companies, and a lot of them didn't actually brew beer. They're essentially estate agents who bought pubs. That then allowed chefs the possibility of opening up and owning a pub, which was impossible before. And so you had the start of the gastropubs in places like Clerkenwell in the late 90s and that sort of thing. But one of the problem is that the pub cos overpaid for the pubs. They were massively overvalued. A lot of these are significantly valuable Victorian buildings, beautifully made, in very, very expensive addresses. But actually,
and that's a really, really good point. And I do wonder, just with the culture and aspect of that, you talk about teetotal Methodists. I'm teetotal, and I don't believe really anything, but I certainly have a Methodist background. Maybe I'm one of them, but I love the pub. I love going to the pub. I've been to the pub with you previously, Rory. And the point is, I suppose, as well, that we're at risk of losing the pub as the hub, as the King calls it.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't like that word hub.
Okay.
It's massive New Labour, but I know what he's trying to say. But the thing is, nothing should stay the same. Nothing should stay in aspect.
Yeah.
You know, they should develop. They should change towards culture. You know, in Ireland now, Guinness Zero and Draft is sold almost as much as Guinness.
Yeah.
And it should be the same here. You know, it's not all about going out and men behaving badly, drinking 25 pints on a Friday night and eating a curry. Drinking it probably after 25 pints.
After 25 pints, certainly. No,
but that was a very temporary sort of cultural blip, really. That idea of stand-up, vertical drinking, getting as drunk as you can. It was never like that before, and it's becoming less like that now. You know, the pub really in rural areas is a place to connect with people. It's there for when your kids come home from university, you want to celebrate. It's there when the in-laws come down and you need a break or you want to take them down. It's there when work's been crap and you just need half an hour just to stand on top of something.
Yeah.
Or even just stare out into the distance and look at a 500
and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Rory, listen, thank you very much as before. That is Rory Hanrahan there, who is a pub landlord and writer. There's 2 articles, one on Spiked Online, why the Labour Party lose the pub, in Rory's opinion, and in the Spectator, can Nigel Farage save the great British pub? Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Barry, who says, I don't think Northern Ireland is a shining example of peaceful diversity. Sectarianism is alive and well there. We're governed by a political class who don't have the best interests of the province at heart. A united Ireland is all they care about. Not all of them want a united Ireland. Graham in Milton Keynes says, let's not forget that Peter Mandelson's severance pay is not liable for income tax. Ben in London, let's call a spade a spade. Lammy is a liar and is trying to save his own hide. He is a coward and is throwing his friend, as he likes to call Starmer, under the bus. Paul says, at the end of the day, what would two-tier Keir call for if this was the Tories and not Labour? Very good point. Lynn says, I was working in a prison 20 years ago. A prisoner approached and asked, why am I in prison? He explained he had committed the same offence as Mandelson for an inappropriate use of funds, but half the amount. He got 18 months in jail. Very interesting. Simon in Devon says, what we do know about Keir Starmer is he doesn't dream. He doesn't believe in God, and he employs the Prince of Darkness. What a chapter in his memoir. What a joke. He's finished. Richard in Northampton says, Keir Starmer made a big apology to the victims of Epstein, making out that he cared deeply about what happened to them. However, he has never made such impassioned speeches about the victims of Britain's rape gangs. In fact, he and his government are dragging their feet on setting up the inquiry. It is clear that his reactions to scandals differ according to his direct involvement. John says from Perth, as a teacher, we try to instill responsibility into our students, yet our Prime Minister refuses to own his own decision, and his alone to appoint Mandelson. I'm sick to death of hearing politicians weasel out with lessons will be learned, thoughts and prayers. None of them take ownership of their decision. None of them will resign until their lies no longer hold. Thank you too to Andy in Middlesbrough, who says, it shows the serious state of this country when I can't think of anyone in the Labour Party who would do a better job than the worst Prime Minister we have ever had. Simon in Devon says, everyone getting very upset about Mandelson's payoff. The real issue is how someone who never earned more than £150,000 a year from the public purse ended up with a £12 million home in Regent's Park. Clearly he started charging properly for selling his country out, in Simon's opinion, not just an osteopathy course here or £75,000 there. Well, we know Lord Mandelson made a huge amount of money from Global Council, which completely he's no longer part of as well. Dean has been in touch too from East London and says, it really is time for all the names included in the Epstein files to be made public, whoever they are. Well, Dean, I disagree with you, because what about the victims of sexual trafficking and sexual assault as well? I mean, that is something that those people deserve anonymity, so I'm afraid I can't agree with you. But I think the main thrust of your point is the perpetrators, and I think that's correct. Luke says, congratulations on the figures for your show. Thank you, Luke. You always offer all sides of a debate and a fair and unbiased opportunity. Thank you. That is very, very kind, Luke. Bill says, if Miliband gets 80 people to back him, can Starmer still call a general election? He can, but it would be very interesting if we're in that situation, because then there would be a Labour leadership election would be automatically triggered. Final one before the break from David in Lancashire. The Tories need to have the humility to start working with Reform. So Reform are not fighting Tories in seats they would otherwise win. If the Tories don't do this, they will be consigned to history, just like Labour. Great show as always. Thank you, David. He says the best political analysis of the week. Gosh, very nice compliments today. I need to stop reading them out, otherwise my head will explode. David says on the Tories, that's a very, very interesting point. And actually, Nigel Farage, of course, always says that he's very annoyed and feels very burned by the fact that then Brexit Party candidates often stood down in many different constituencies, allowing the Tories to come through on that one. Lots more voice notes coming up. We'll get some calls as well. Simon in Wigan, Mark in Lincolnshire are going to join us, I hope, and plenty more messages to come. However you want to communicate with us in the next 14 minutes, 0344 499 1000 is the main number. Stay with us.
So there's some people in society who believe that, you know, the flag is the symbol of the country, we should be proud of it, we should wave it, and, you know, I'm one of those. People who are apologists for the British Empire, for apologists for how we've been in the past, and it's almost a symbol of national shame to them. It's kind of like, well, we flew that flag. Oh, I'm not sure about this one.
The whole national shame thing, I believe that actually that's a sort of a greater agenda going on, to be honest with you. It's apologist nature of of so many successive governments now who have sort of almost been forced to be embarrassed by our great British history.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mohammed has been in touch about pubs. This is his voice note.
Good morning, Peter. Mohammed here, Iranian. The reason why Labour government hate pubs is basically two things. First of all, it's water-based. Majority of it is water-based. They hate alcohol and drinking, and they wanted to be banned anyway. So if the pubs go, they wouldn't shed a tear. The other factor is that pubs at the moment is the last place for free speech gatherings that Labour haven't been able to curtail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Really interesting to hear from you. Wayne has been in touch about the downfall of the pub and the possible reasons.
Morning, Peter. It's Wayne from Erdington in Birmingham. The downfall of the British pub is the rise of Islamism. We've got more mosques than we've got pubs now, I think, in Birmingham. Watch out the rest of the country, because it'll be happening very near you very, very soon. Keep up the good work, Peter.
Thank you, Wayne. Let's hear from Anna.
Good morning, Peter. Anna, sorry. So I was just listening to your Tory guest glither on about how great the Tories are now, in the hope that we've all got amnesia. Can I say something to the Tories, Labour, and the crazy guy who does all the windsurfing and space hopping? Nigel Farage could sit there right now on TV, on the internet, everywhere, and he could just sit and dribble. And you know what, guys? I hate to tell you, we're that sick of the mainstream politics and the mainstream media, we'd still vote for him. There's your problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Dave in Kent says Starmer is a legal expert and will be familiar with the legal maxim, let justice be done though the heavens fall. If he is guilty in some way, he must resign, says Dave. Gary says we're in trouble at the moment. We can't carry on with this Labour government, but Reform aren't quite ready to govern yet. Bill in Devon says the reason Labour do not want pubs anymore is because in a time that you're clamping down on free speech via social media and the like, it just leaves places like pubs where people whisper in corners, just like in the 17th century when people whispered in corners to oppose the then king. I know it's a great conspiracy theory, but ... says Bill. Gary says, ironically, the fact Starmer is so bad at his job and Labour are doing so badly in the polls means that the Prime Minister can actually stay in office for his full 5 years if he wants to, just by threatening his party with a general election if anyone challenges his leadership. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and his ministers and MPs all know that after that general election they would be best sitting on the opposition backbenches for the foreseeable future, or at worst, looking for a new job. Phil says, on Islam, Labour's approach is not merely pro-Islam, but compulsory Islam. Like it or not, you must bend the knee to Islam. The legally enforced compulsion to Islam will, I am afraid, follow within days and weeks of Labour enacting the Islamophobia definition. Really enjoying the show today, says Phil. Teresa says, sorry, but I don't think it's time these royals went. We are not living in the dark ages anymore. Sorry, I think it's about time these royals went. Apologies. Teresa says, I think it's about time these royals went. We are not living in the dark ages anymore, and I know they say they bring in lots of money, but people will still come to see Buckingham Palace. I went to China, to the Forbidden City, and there hasn't been an emperor there for a very long time. They own a lot of land, so I'm sure they will cope without the taxpayer funding them. Ernie says, when I was growing up, in my 60s, you barely heard a word about religion. It was something that people of faith followed, come together one day a week at their holy place of worship, like a church or a mosque or a synagogue, celebrating days such as Christmas, Eid and Diwali. That was it. Now it's everywhere. You turn on the TV, when you read a paper, if you turn on your laptop or phone, even in our politics, it's religion. It shouldn't be allowed to affect everyone's day-to-day life, as it does. There's too much emphasis on it. Let's speak to Mark in Lincolnshire. Mark's been waiting patiently. Good to talk to you, Mark. What would you like to say today?
Morning, Peter.
Hi there.
Hi there. Yeah, it's just I wanted to pick up again on the forced diversity into the countryside. Basically, there's too white. If you remember that story from this last week,
I do.
Something came to my attention yesterday. And that was a guy that you guys have platformed before. He does a lot of good work as well. I was really quite surprised to hear him say this. And that was Ken Hines.
I didn't hear that interview, Mark. I must say I missed it.
Right, he was speaking on a different channel.
Okay.
And it was about this subject, and essentially the very first thing that came out of his mouth was that I think absolutely it's been white for far too long.
The countryside. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, this is just a racist statement, Peter.
Okay, I just want to be really careful. We're talking about an interview on another station that I haven't seen, and you're calling someone a racist. I just want to be really, really careful about this, because I just don't have. I'm not saying it's not true, and that's your opinion, Mark. But I just want to be careful about doing that, because that is pretty libelous. And I mean, I just haven't seen it. But on the Mark, stay with me. Hold on, Mark. On the general issue of the belief that some people have that the countryside is racist, what do you think?
What do I think? I think it's obviously nonsense, because what you have to look at is a broader context, I think, with this particular argument anyway. Because you have, for example, London, 33% white British, 34% Luton, 42% Birmingham, 33% Leicester. You go on and on and on, all the big towns, all the big cities. Essentially pretty much just minority white British now. They've essentially moved into what they're now talking about attacking, what they're now talking about they desperately want diversity in, which is essentially the rural shires, as it were. Because that's where, let's be honest, all those people that have left the cities and the big towns, that's where they've moved to. Because funny enough, you know...
Well, it's this idea that being white is bad. It's this idea that if they're, I mean, the vast majority of this people in this country overall are white, and you say, well, this is a predominantly white area. Why is that necessarily bad? We wouldn't say this is a bad thing because it's a predominantly Asian area. Well, some people would, but I wouldn't. But we don't generally go around saying that.
Well, you wouldn't be allowed to say that. That's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, this whole notion, this whole idea, as far as I'm concerned, is little short. You know, it's essentially just tantamount to forced ethnic replacement. That's basically what it is.
Well, it hasn't happened, certainly, but the kind of talk that is happening, I think it can be dangerous. Mark, listen, thank you for it. I think it's unfair at the very least. Let's see if we can squeeze in some more voice notes. Shirley has some thoughts on Pat McFadden.
Good morning, Peter. It's Shirley from the Cotswolds. Pat McFadden, he's suddenly worried about the country and he doesn't want leaders changing every 2 years. Well, he wasn't so bothered about that when him and the rest of the party were baying for the resignations of Theresa May, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson. They weren't so concerned then. I've never heard so much waffle and lies as what's going on in the TV interviews at the moment. People like Emily Maitlis and Wes Streeting, who cozied up to Mandelson and were his best mates, they need to be dragged, kicking, screaming down to a police station and tell exactly what they know about him. They're all hiding. It's a disgrace. Thank you, Peter. Bye.
Thank you, Shirley, and no suggestion, obviously, that Emily Maitlis or West Trading has done anything illegal. Gary says if that bloke representing the pub trade thinks, well, he wasn't representing the pub trade, he just is a landlord, thinks they've got problems now, just think that what the problems are going to be in 10 years from now when advancements in virtual reality technology mean that I can buy my beer in the supermarket and have a drink with 3 mates in the pub, even without leaving my living room. Very interesting point. Paul's voice note now on Epstein.
Good morning, Peter. Paul up in Hartlepool. Sadly, while we're talking about the Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Mandelson debacle and the Labour Party's links to paedophilia and a paedophile, the economy is flatlining, bouncing along with no growth whatsoever. We're borrowing about 20 billion a month, which in my estimation means that, God forbid, by 2029 we'll owe 3.8 trillion, nearly 4 trillion, which is another £1 trillion. What chance have our children and grandchildren got with a government that is so economically illiterate and just doesn't understand basic mathematics? None of the cabinet have had real jobs. They've all been career politicians, and I worry more about our future of our children than anything else.
Thank you very much. Well, Keir Starmer, of course, hasn't been a career politician. He didn't enter politics until 2015. There are a few others as well, but the point in general, I think, stands. Let's hear a final voice note from Ken.
Morning, Peter. It's Ken from Lancashire. Can you help me, please? I am really stuck. I keep getting told, or I keep hearing, that Ed Miliband is loved by Labour voters, and so is Angela Rayner. I don't see anything in either of them. I don't see any quality. I don't see any honesty, integrity. I just don't get it. So I need to know what I'm missing, because I hear it all the time. Can you help, please? Thanks very much. Bye.
Ken, I would very happily help you if I had anything to offer in that regard. Certainly, Ed Miliband, I think, is a pretty dreadful politician. I think he was a terrible leader of the Labour Party. Angela Rayner, she has a compelling story. She connects with people in a way that a lot of people don't. Would she be a good Prime Minister? I don't think so. Would she be a good leader of the Labour Party? I don't think so. But if people like them, politics, sadly, is a popularity contest. And Ken, you may not like these two people. I may not necessarily like them. But if enough